She was so pathetic that even her own family took advantage of her. That girl was the second daughter of the Hassel family, named Lunatia. She was forced to get up when her brother shouted for her. The eldest son, named Solil, greeted her with a bright smile. He sat in the middle of the bed and told her that today he had a crucial exam. He had to obtain the right to become a knight, as his father wished. Precisely because of that, he started begging Lunatia to see the future. He only turned to her when he needed her, just like at that very moment. Lunatia tried to explain the gravity of the consequences of that. Despite everything, he kept insisting that she reveal the answers to him. The girl wanted to say she felt unwell, but her sister interrupted them. Rosalind arrived with Cynthia and immediately started showering her sister with compliments. Rosalind approached and scolded Lunatia for still being in bed. She added that she had come to wake her up, so this wouldn't anger their father. Lunatia tried to explain the reason, but they interrupted her instantly. Rosalind said it was normal for her to cover up for her younger sister's mistakes. All those words instantly provoked indignation in the tired girl. The older sister immediately began manipulating her, demanding she read her future in exchange. She extended her hand and talked about her important business deal tomorrow. She was interested in knowing if the mine she plans to buy will be profitable. She smiled, insisting that she was doing all of this for the good of her family. Lunatia tried to refute again, explaining that this left her exhausted. Cynthia made a worried face, thinking Luna had gotten sick. She begged them to look at her future 3 days out, instead of Rosalind's. She was interested in a triviality, like the dresses of the court ladies at the ball. She wanted to appear in a dress that would attract all male attention. After those words, everyone started fighting for the honor of having their future read. Each presented arguments that seemed of the utmost importance to them. Finally, they looked at their sister like hungry vultures. In every generation of the Hassel family, a child capable of seeing the future was born. A large birthmark on the bearer's chest confirmed it. This ability was the family's foundation, but even they couldn't use it often. The Lunatia family exploited her mercilessly, and her right eye went blind. The firstborn, Rosaline, became the house's first spoiled child. Shortly after, Lunatia and the desired male child, Solil, were born. Although they were twins, their parents adored him much more. They quickly forgot Lunatia's existence, leaving her alone. 5 years later, Cynthia was born, astonishing everyone with her beauty. Thus, a happy family was formed, to which the young girl did not belong. She was just a shadow in front of the favorite children of the Hassels. Lunatia was only remembered when her power awakened, and boy, did she love it. But her greed soon caused her body to crumble. One day, by chance, she heard that a certain marquis was looking for a fiancé. Everyone predicted that lucky woman would live amidst luxury and pampering. Those words allowed Lunatia to glimpse hope in Marquis Iltern. He was a rather capricious war hero and a real heartthrob. His assistant, Urin, announced mischievously that another letter had arrived. Iltern Knox immediately proceeded to read the letter from the Viscount's daughter. The man calmly ordered the assistant to convey a polite rejection. Urin asked bluntly how long he would keep doing all this. They knew perfectly well that he was covering for his friend the prince, who was looking for a wife. He smiled mockingly and proposed marriage to Urin, instead of deceiving young ladies. Mr. Knox didn't react to his provocation and threw the letters away. Urin hurried to pick up the sheets and noticed something strange about the new letter. It seemed that awkward comment managed to capture the man's attention. Urin assumed the letter belonged to the young lady and not her father. All these facts suggested that the daughter of the Hassel family herself wanted to be his wife. Urin nodded and concluded that she was indeed very interested. Ilther Knox thought deeply, as if weighing his options. Finally, he stood up abruptly and ordered that they should not reply to that girl. Urin asked sarcastically if he really wanted to meet her in person. The man just buttoned his coat and said that this woman might dispel his boredom. From that precise moment, not a single day passed for Lunatia without her thinking about that letter. This man was nicknamed the Moon Devourer and enjoyed great renown. Despite his reputation, he amassed money and built a mansion far from civilization. Unpleasant rumors about him periodically surfaced due to his dangerous behavior. Some even murmured that he was capable of leaving an enemy to be devoured by wolves. As soon as his search for a wife became known, nobles began sending letters immediately. Lunatia understood that she had to please him, as she wouldn't last much longer in her own family. It seems the maid noticed the change in her mood and decided to ask what was wrong. Lunacia did not want to reveal the torments hidden in her soul. The servants already knew that her fiancé would arrive today to discuss their union. The young girl suddenly remembered a huge detail. She had inherited memories from her ancestors that she had to continue. The problem was that little Solil had thrown the book into the pond. Lunacia managed to reconstruct some notes about the danger of using it often. It indicated that eventually one could lose all 5 senses. It was true because the girl could now see nothing with one eye. She remembered how shocking that new information was to her. It took her a lot to accept that it could destroy her own health. She suddenly looked at her reflection, distorted by panic. Lunacia had never done this before. But this was the crucial moment. For the first time, she decided to find out what her own future held. The young girl touched the mirror and begged it to show her what she longed for. The next instant, she felt absolute darkness cover everything. Suddenly, she realized she couldn't feel anything at all. Her body and mind were like in a void that made life impossible. The memories said that whoever lost one sense would lose the rest over time. After reading it, Lunacia accepted her fate and put the book aside. Now she wanted to live this year as she pleased, so as not to have regrets later. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't see anyone. The girl almost jumped out of fright when she felt unfamiliar hands. In front of her was the Imperial Knight of the 2nd Division, Rondel Eladi. Lunacia quickly scolded him for appearing so suddenly. The young man noticed her displeased expression and assumed she was offended. He smiled and said he had decided to visit his future fiancée. Rondel added that Solil and Cynthia would be delighted to see him. At first, this boy seemed kind and understanding to her, capable of great friendship. She thought no one else would ever demand anything from her. Lunacia decided to get to the point quickly and asked him for a favor. As expected, he only demanded that she quickly read his future. She reaffirmed that she didn't care how she felt. Her family was famous because all their ancestors were great knights. Despite this, Rondel did not have a special talent with the sword. Being her future husband, he often used her gift and achieved great things. She wanted to get rid of her current commitment situation, and that's why she needed a new husband. Meanwhile, he continued trying to manipulate her to achieve his goal. Lunacia felt such disgust that the urge to scream overwhelmed her. She wanted to reply, but the maid announced the arrival of a letter. The young girl froze, assuming it was sent by that man. She changed instantly and told Rondel that he was free. He protested, but she abruptly said goodbye to her fiancé. After this, she completely forgot him and started writing a letter. She looked at the letter and realized it was from the Moon Devourer. That same night, the young girl left for his sinister mansion. The Marquis invited her to a private meeting, which astonished the family. Shortly before, she had discussed the meeting with them at dinner. The man was surprised and asked her if she understood what she was saying. He was amazed by his own daughter's unusual determination. He banged the table and reminded her how important the alliance with Alad's son was to them. Nicholas Hassel was furious about his daughter's decision. The young girl tried to remain calm and begged him to listen to her. She wanted to take a sip, but the trembling in her body prevented her. Lunacia noticed that she had unintentionally dropped a knife on the floor. Nicholas sighed tiredly and reproached his daughter for her clumsiness. He gestured to the maid and ordered the cutlery to be replaced. The man darkened and recalled everything she had done wrong. He added that she must help her loved ones by reading their future. She was disgusted that he only talked about that. His wife, Sanria, quickly supported her husband's words. She mentioned Rosaline, who founded her business and supports the family. Even Solil prepared to be a high-ranking knight for his family. She also mentioned Cynthia, who is diligently looking for her future husband. The woman concluded that Lunacia must also do something for the family's good. She mentioned all this to deny the annulment of the engagement. Rosalind immediately asked if she had perhaps fought with Rondel. Cynthia supported her, saying they shouldn't break the engagement. Solil remembered how Rondel stood by him in difficult times. All those words convinced Lunacia that everyone didn't care. Finally, Nicholas stood up and declared that he needed to think about her proposal. After that, all family members left, leaving her alone. Lunacia didn't know whether to tell them about the Moon Devourer's invitation. She knew for certain that she no longer had the right to give up. She had to take advantage of the fact that she had interested a guy like that. After some time, they finally arrived at the warrior's castle. The girl got excited and tried to get down, but she twisted her ankle. She quickly grabbed the door so as not to fall flat on her face. She felt once more how uncomfortable it was to live with only one eye. The The coachman tried to explain how dangerous it was in this area. He suggested she shouldn't continue if she was so scared. However, suddenly she thought she was born to be there. She said goodbye to the coachman, thanking him for his help on the way. Lunacia smiled and wished that her future would be filled with joy. Meanwhile, the Marquis was already anticipating the future meeting. Yurin asked if her presence made him so happy. He was right, and in a couple of minutes the girl was in front of him. Lunacia politely greeted Marquis Iltern. She walked forward without noticing that there was a table in front of her. The next instant, she tripped and almost fell forward. She smiled awkwardly and said she couldn't see where she was walking. The man instantly detected that she was blind in the right eye. He observed her closely, as if needing confirmation. Lunatica thought she should get straight to the point. She looked at him with all seriousness and asked him to marry her. The proposal was so unexpected that he was petrified. The man stated severely that he was not planning to marry soon. He also said he spread that rumor so as not to lose his position as head so young. Hearing that, she assumed he didn't want to give power to his brother. She gently touched his hand, as if trying to seduce him. The man froze when she squeezed his hands and brought them close to her face. Finally, she gathered the courage to reveal her secret gift as a seer. Lunacia took his hands again and told him that she only needed to touch someone. Thanks to that, she could see any fragment of the future. The man paused, wondering if the legend about her family was true. Lunacia reiterated that she was offering him a marriage of convenience in exchange for a daily prediction. She added that he would have the right to take her life when she became a nuisance. The girl spoke of this with such naturalness that it was chilling. The Marquis said she was very calm for someone desiring a mortal pact. He was surprised by how much she longed to become part of his family. The girl only answered him silently with a smile and a serene nod. The man exhaled and said she was the most interesting of all the candidates. His response instantly delighted the desperate girl. Suddenly, he grew serious and said he had to prove it right there. Lunacia repeated her request and affirmed she would do it however he wished. After that, she gripped the warrior's hands tighter and prepared herself. The girl stood still, immersing herself in the timelines. She immediately felt fragments of events collapsing upon her. Finally, she opened her eyes and noticed how her body weakened. The girl fell directly into the Duke's arms, as if a vision had stolen all her energy. She regained consciousness instantly and explained that this required a lot of strength. The girl touched his chest and told him that the maid would bring tea soon, pointing to the rug, saying that she might enter without permission and then fall. Lunacia added that his assistant would manage to catch the girl. She said that if he fixed the rug, the future would change completely. She hadn't finished speaking when the maid burst into the room. She tried to advance with the tray, but her foot got tangled in the rug. Instantly she fell, dropping the tray. But she was unharmed. Lunacia saw that everything turned out well and smiled somewhat awkwardly. She emphatically declared that this future was impossible to change. Now all that remained was to anxiously observe the Marquis's reaction. It seemed that everyone present was completely shocked. Finally, the man smiled cunningly and said he understood everything. He didn't understand how all this worked, but he declared that he believed her. He ordered the maid to come in later and added that he didn't want tea. He waited until they were alone and declared that her gift was very valuable. The Marquis suddenly remembered that she had a brother and sisters. Furthermore, he also knew that Lunacia already had a fiancé. He took her by surprise by asking if this information was true. Yurin immediately recalled that the Hassel family had promised the second daughter to the son of the Aladi family. The young girl froze when he mentioned the main purpose of this union. Finally, she declared that it was true, but she had already requested a divorce. The Marquis sank into thought, trying to understand her sudden decisions. Lunacia extended her hand and begged him to help her with this decision. She added firmly that she simply did not wish to be Rondel's partner. Apparently, the men were stunned by her unexpected words. The Marquis even let out a laugh at the simplicity of the girl's reason. He asked if she had seriously decided to come to him only for this. Lunacia was petrified when he said she detested the Count Aladi's son. The young girl supported him with a smile and confirmed that it could be put that way. She added that she might not have any chance of a happy future. For that very reason, she turned to the sinister hermit, the Marquis. Her resolution was read in her gaze, showing the full weight of the past. Finally, Knox said that, as a sign of respect, he would take her as his wife. Lunacia was delighted and said it was an honor for her to be with him. She bowed deeply and thanked him for having trusted her. The Marquis said he would transfer her to his property in a few days. He left, suggesting beforehand that she stay at the castle for the night. The Marquis noticed how much she hated returning to her family. Mentioning her family was enough for her to become gloomy and sad. To finish, he turned to Yurin to prepare the best room for the lady. The man protested, realizing that all the tasks fell on him again. He turned to the girl and smiled, calling Lunacia lovely little thing. On the way to her room, she analyzed everything that had happened. She decided to keep the price she paid for her gift a secret. The girl discovered that the Marquis was not as terrible as the rumors claimed. However, tomorrow she would have to return home. Since her childhood, she only dreamed of being noticed. Even a little bit. She opened her eyes and, with difficulty, remembered that she had already arrived home. The girl recalled her father's face, distorted by anger. He locked her in the basement for leaving home without his permission. Lunacia understood that her family ties were a complete sham. Upon discovering her powers, she felt happy, believing they would love her because of it. She didn't know the consequences and wasted her strength thoughtlessly. She wondered if Marquis Ilthern would come for her. As promised, she remembered when, before saying goodbye, she asked him not to worry. She apologized when he told her that her face said absolutely everything. He looked her in the eyes and confidently affirmed that she was now his wife. The man begged her to wait so he could formally meet her family. The young girl blushed at his frankness and ended up accepting again. She had no other choice but to believe and wait for the Marquis. That night, he looked at her with determination in his beautiful eyes. Suddenly, he discovered that it delighted him to see her eyes until the end. One night, the Chief of Destiny gathered everyone to discuss some news. 5 days had already passed since he placed Lunacia under house arrest. She barely ate anything the maids brought her. The man calmly replied that he wouldn't let her go until she apologized. The younger sister wondered where Lunacia might have spent the night. Rosalind assumed she had escaped to the city and stayed in a hotel. She also mentioned that a big deal with new partners would take place very soon. Cynthia supported her, saying she also needed a prediction before the ball. Solil couldn't wait any longer and got up to run towards Lunacia. He wanted to run out of the room, but he bumped into a surprised Rondel. Like everyone else, he had come to see Lunacia. The head of the family was immediately happy to see his beloved fiancée. He extended his arms and begged him to forgive his foolish daughter. Rondel confessed that he started to worry upon receiving her letter, breaking off the engagement. He wanted to know how she was and understand the reason for her behavior. He supposed he should apologize for paying less attention to her. Nicholas was instantly happy, thinking that was the cause. He started proposing that they simply talk together with his daughter. They froze upon hearing the servants' cries of surprise. The servants tried to stop the strangers, saying they couldn't burst in like that. The Marquis asked why they were telling him such a thing. He asked severely if perhaps no one knew who he was. The man was carrying a huge bouquet of roses, while Urian imagined his identity. Everyone was completely stunned to learn that it was the war hero himself. While everyone was in shock, Nicholas decided to shout. He asked how he dared to show up at the mansion without proper respect. The man demanded that the Marquis leave the house immediately. He kept talking about it until he finally understood who he was speaking to. Nicholas didn't know his face, and only the crest made him understand everything. He darkened with fear and asked if he was truly that Marquis. All the other family members remained frozen, awaiting the outcome. The Marquis apologized for this very sudden visit to their home. He introduced himself as Nox Iltern, the Moon Devourer Marquis. He left them slack-jawed by saying he had come to ask for Lady Lunacia's hand. Nicholas was beside himself with fury upon hearing that declaration. He tried to ask what he was saying, but the Marquis extended his hand. Iltern placed his hand on his chest and said he had fallen in love with his daughter. Rondel instantly shrieked, saying that was simply impossible. He said that Luna was engaged to him and would never be his. Nox simply replied that he had already contacted her father, and he had agreed to break the engagement. With that declaration, it left him completely speechless. His assistant reported that they had already settled the legal matters. In a letter from the Count to Lottie, it was indicated that he would not oppose their love. Rondel couldn't believe his father had yielded to Marquis Nox. It turns out the war hero had the right to intervene in the affairs of Imperial Knights. The Marquis explained his status and mentioned Lady Hassel's words. He cited that she never wanted to be Rondel's partner. The young man immediately protested, saying that wasn't true and that he would never have accepted. The Marquis only replied that he left the paperwork for later. He turned to the maid and asked her to take him to Lady Hassel. Fury began to invade him upon learning that she was in the pantry. He asked why they were treating someone blind in the right eye like that. The parents immediately protested, saying she was completely healthy. Rondell supported them, affirming that they would have noticed immediately. The Marquis understood that no one close to the girl cared. He demanded again that they take him to where she was being held. After this, he followed the maid without any delay. All the others watched the strange Marquis suspiciously. It seemed only Cynthia looked at him with joy and desire. Her heart pounded because of his handsome appearance and bearing. She crossed her arms, suddenly realizing that he would be the perfect boyfriend. Meanwhile, Luna was boredly packing her things, waiting for the Marquis. She slowly reviewed her old dresses and everything in the closet. She didn't want to take many things and only managed to grab a couple of dresses. She also managed to grab some memories, which had somehow survived. This was all she had managed to take before they locked her up. Now she contemplatively looked at a part of her past life. She gently passed her hand over the dress, as if feeling an object. A brooch appeared in her hand, a gift from Rondell on her previous birthday. Now she suspected that he only asked a maid to buy any trinket. That day, everyone forgot her birthday and only congratulated Solil, despite them being twins. This sad fact made her understand that he didn't want to take her with him. She threw the brooch away and started packing the rest of her belongings. The young girl froze upon hearing a strange, distant noise. She felt dread when the door suddenly burst open with a crash. Lunacia couldn't believe the Marquis was finally coming for her. Her eyes opened wider, and joy began to be born in her heart. The Marquis offered her flowers and said he had come to fetch his beloved fiancée. Lunacia became flustered when asking the reason for the bouquet. The man explained it was a custom and proposed leaving. The girl quickly grabbed her bag and followed his pace. She was even more surprised when he calmly took her bag. Lunacia thanked him for his help, but he froze. They turned upon hearing Nicholas's shout, calling for Luna. He was accompanied by Rondell, who also didn't want to let her go. Lunacia looked at those who had never cared about her before. They lunged at her like vultures, reluctant to let go of their prey. Everyone pressured her, trying to get some response. Rondell shook her by the shoulders, but she swatted his hand away forcefully. Finally, she gathered the courage to face him and ordered him to shut up. Rondell froze, unable to believe that the docile Luna would act like that. After a brief pause, Lunacia dropped the bombshell. She wanted to marry Iltern. She added that, from now on, she would not use her powers under their orders. The young girl decreed that they should not meddle in her life anymore. The Marquis declared that they could only see her with his permission from now on. He severely forbade them from asking her to see their future as before. Nicholas couldn't believe she had revealed her secret to the Marquis. Lunacia replied that they would soon be family, and she saw no problem. Rondell condemned the Marquis for only needing the girl's abilities. He shouted for Luna to wake up and see who was by her side. The girl, with disgust, muttered that they were the ones who had used her. She turned around and decreed that she had nothing more to say to them. Knox asked if she was sure she didn't want to say goodbye to her family. She turned and said that only now had they noticed her blindness. She dismissed with contempt those she once considered her family. After some time, they finally arrived at the Iltern residence. As Knox ordered, they prepared the best room for Lunacia. The girl was amazed by such a beautiful and large room. They even had the delicacy to place a vase with water for the girl's flowers. Urin added that her personal maids would arrive a little later. He smiled and suggested she rest before dinner. The girl remembered that she had to predict his future once a day. Knox Iltern said he remembered the conditions of their deal. He said that although her gift was useful, she didn't have to use it every day. The girl couldn't believe he was rejecting such an opportunity. He gestured with his hand and said that he would ask her himself if he needed anything. The man hurried out of her room along with his assistant. The girl unexpectedly discovered that she was alone again. She was struck that such a luxurious room had been assigned to her. Without further ado, she began to reflect on the reason for his sudden rejection of the gift. Unlike her father, he didn't believe she had to fulfill her duty daily. From now on, she wouldn't have to cater to her family's selfish requests. All this was thanks to him, the only one who had been kind to her. She smiled thinking about how his gentle character contrasted with his imposing image. Lunacia was happy to at least be able to hear him. Meanwhile, Urin also noticed his kindness towards the girl. He started joking that his cold heart had finally melted. The man reminded him that, before retiring, he had never refused female attention. During wartime, Even ladies of ill repute gave him fiery nicknames. Yurin said he almost died laughing when he found out about this from his colleagues. Nox threatened him with a beating and admitted that the past is hard to forget. Every day they were covered in the blood of their enemies, and their comrades died one after another. The man froze when Yurin told him that he would soon have his own family. He thought he couldn't leave Lady Hassel to her fate. That day, he noticed how her hands trembled with fear in front of her family. He saw it in the way she held the bouquet, dodging the criticism of her relatives. For the first time, he felt such a strong desire to protect someone. At that very moment, a knight ran to him and informed him about the misfortune. Nox noticed that, after exploring the forest, he had returned alone. The man was quite bruised and covered in bruises, as if they had been attacked. Meanwhile, Lunacia was meeting her new maid. The young girl bowed with a cheerful smile, surprising the other girl. Her former servants attended to her family daily, but she didn't have that luxury. Rosalind claimed that was done for her own safety. Now in front of her was her personal maid, ready for anything. Lunacia was delighted to see the young woman's enthusiasm before her. She told her how happy she was to meet her, and replied with a warm smile. After a while, Sierra asked her if she was really blind in the right eye. The girl immediately asked if the Marquis had told her that. She smiled and supposed that was why they had chosen her as a maid. She mentioned that her beloved was a subordinate of Nox and also lost an eye. This indicated that Nox had made sure of the maid's qualification. 3 years ago, a war reached their lands and lasted about half a year. In the midst of the series of deaths, there was one who didn't even think about retreating. Sierra supposed that in this way, Nox had taken care of her comfort. Lunacia blushed involuntarily at such a pleasant gesture from Nox. Everyone said how terrible he was, but he turned out to be an attentive man. Sierra continued to insist that he was a wonderful person. She added that her beloved still served him despite his injury. Lunacia thought about why he needed soldiers, but the offer of tea distracted her. Sierra rushed enthusiastically to prepare a new and delicious tea. Luna was amazed at what a good person Sierra was. At first she seemed uneasy, but Luna even liked that. Alone, she decided to start writing her memoirs. Periodically, she added new lines about her condition to her diary. The young woman calmly wrote about not knowing when she would lose the other 5 senses. That's why she wanted to keep writing about what she needed to do in a year. She was happy to have made new and valuable friends. After a good while, she had finally finished it. She skimmed it contentedly and decided that for today it was enough. Luna recorded everything she had endured in her family home. However, now she had a real chance to create new memories. Suddenly, Lunacia realized that Sierra had not returned. She hurried to slightly open the door and found the girl crying inconsolably. She ran to her instantly and tried to find out what had happened. It turned out that her beloved man, Robert, had disappeared without warning. A short while ago she spoke of him fondly, and now she was crying nonstop. Apparently, his squadron stumbled upon a flock of blood-sucking bats while exploring the thicket of the forest near the castle. It was supposed that his group ran into a flock of blood-sucking bats. Lunacia was indignant that such dangerous creatures lived nearby. She remembered reading about those beasts only in books. The girl supposed they should send a rescue team. Nox suddenly appeared behind her and said he was going to look for them. Luna felt uneasy realizing he was going alone. He said he had to find Robert before nightfall. Lunacia focused again on Sierra's bitter tears. She remembered the happy smile with which she spoke of her beloved. Her joy quickly turned into a broken and unhappy feeling. Lunacia clutched her chest, as if making a crucial decision. Nox, without wasting time, announced his imminent departure to the east. Yurin longed to stay for Sierra, but she thanked him and rejected his offer. Yurin proposed a break together, but the young woman flatly refused. She firmly declared that the time had come to honor the agreement. Even Mr. Nox himself was stunned by her sharp declaration. His doubts about the true extent of her power still lingered. He turned and bluntly asked her if she could locate Robert. The girl asked him to extend his hand and decided to try. She tried to concentrate as much as possible and closed her eyes tightly. Before her eyes, a whirlwind of potential misfortunes was unleashed. They included the possibility that Robert would die because of a wild animal. She visualized Sierra's heartbreaking laments and then the man's funeral. Immediately afterward, Lunacia opened her eyes suddenly and leaned back. Nox noticed her surprise and decided to ask her what she had seen. The girl confessed with difficulty that, in her vision, they could not save him. The man froze, unable to believe what he had just heard. He mentioned a bear with a crescent-shaped scar on its forehead. It was supposed to attack Robert in a cave, similar to his lair. Knox immediately retorted that the team was exploring another area of the forest. Yurin clung to those words instantly and started pondering. The girl begged him to trust her and follow her to the cave after Robert. Knox replied that she could die if she was wrong about anything. Lunacia looked him in the eyes when he said he trusted her. He ordered soldiers to be sent east, where Robert was. He, for his part, planned to enter the bear's lair mentioned by the lady. Lunacia immediately protested, saying that going there alone was dangerous. In response, the man only caressed her cheek and asked her not to worry. He confidently promised that, thanks to her power, they would return alive. His kind words managed to instill confidence in the worried girl. After that, Knox stepped back and ordered Yurin to move forward. Yurin followed him, telling him there was no need to act tough. Lunacia crossed her arms, praying they would return unharmed. She didn't know how the operation would turn out, but she hoped for the best. The young girl didn't even realize how the entire afternoon passed. She vaguely remembered having fallen asleep, waiting for the marquee. The girl suddenly got up, realizing it was already nighttime. The next instant, she bumped into Yurin, who greeted her with a smile. Lunacia immediately bombarded him with questions about the man. He just smiled happily and suggested they take a look. The girl discovered two lovers who had reunited after the separation. Luna was overjoyed because they were fine. It turned out that during the rat attack, Robert tripped and fell off a cliff. He decided to spend the night in a cave, which turned out to be a bear's lair. Yurin added that it was thanks to her that they managed to rescue Robert. They both fell silent upon hearing Lord Knox's voice. He saw the girls smile and said that a bear couldn't defeat him. The man bowed his head and sincerely thanked her for her help. The girl demanded he lift his head and said she was only doing her duty. He replied that she decided to help them of her own free will. Knox thanked her again, saying they wouldn't have succeeded without her. His gratitude seemed so unusual that the girl was surprised. Before, her gift was taken as an obligation, something natural. Yurin added that they had briefly told the couple about her help. They immediately rushed to thank the girl for her assistance. Lunacia felt shame invade her mind due to so much gratitude. Suddenly she remembered she wanted to ask Knox something. Luna asked what kind of place, called the Lunar Meadow, he was looking for. As soon as she said that, her well-being drastically worsened. She couldn't understand why her vision had disappeared so suddenly. The girl made him nervous by suddenly fainting. It seems the long time without using her power affected her. She sank as if into a dream, where she saw herself small again. The little girl was crying, huddled alone in the corner of an empty room. Suddenly, she found an old woman who looked very much like her. She began to calm the crying girl, stroking her back. The little girl confessed, with difficulty, that her father had scolded her. She was trying to calm Rosalind and Soli, who fought over something silly. However, her sister just pushed her away abruptly with her hands. She accidentally bumped into Cynthia, and then she started crying. The woman explained that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she would scold her father. The little girl asked her grandmother why her dad was always angry with her. She thought everything was because of her appearance being different from others. The little girl thought everyone would love her if she were just like her grandmother. The woman hugged her tightly and said she didn't want to use that gift anymore. She confessed that it was a curse and that she would find those who loved her just as she was. She finally concluded that she loved her very much, even without that gift. The grandmother was the only one who sincerely loved Lunacia. After her death from illness, her gift passed to Luna, and she completely forgot her words. Only afterwards did she realize that her grandmother was very right. After some time, she was finally able to open her eyes. Sierra, worried, was standing in front of her. The young woman opened her eyes surprised, not knowing how long she had slept. The maid told her that 3 long hours had passed. She also mentioned that Lunacia had fallen into Lord Knox's arms. Immediately after, he rushed to take her to the resting room. The maid happily concluded that he carried her. Like a princess, after those words, Luna felt her face burn with shame. Sierra suddenly decided to express her gratitude for the help. She bowed deeply, feeling that words were not enough. Lunacia tried to say there was nothing wrong with that. The maid fervently declared that they would do everything to repay her kindness. She mentioned that Lord Knox was already waiting for her for dinner. Sierra happily extended her hands towards the table and invited her in. Lunacia, thoughtfully, hurried to obey and sat down at the table. A short time later, she went towards the pensive Knox. She tried to explain that she was simply exhausted from the day and collapsed. Lunacia apologized for making him wait. The man replied that everything was fine and offered her a seat at the table. As soon as she sat opposite the man, trays were immediately brought to them. The girl discovered a magnificent dish in front of her. She quickly took a bite, feeling her stomach roar with hunger. It seems even she herself was surprised by how delicious the dish was. Knox calmly commented that she had quite a good appetite. The girl wanted to properly enjoy the flavor before it disappeared. Even the Lord noticed how much she liked all the food. She immediately remembered his subordinate, who happily ate whatever they were given. Unfortunately, he was wounded by poisoned arrows in the war. Before dying, he only asked to be freed from that suffering. Lunacia understood what he meant and asked if they had fulfilled his request. Knox agreed and said he would fight for every life possible to save. Suddenly, he remembered how she told him to get rid of her if she wasn't useful. The man asked if she was still sure of her words after hearing his story. Lady Hassel paused briefly and replied that she was sure. She smiled, adding that she was fully aware and had no fear. She stunned him by telling him that he had turned out to be a good person. He murmured that he had allowed himself too much with her. Lunacia didn't hear exactly what he said and decided to ask him. The man just got embarrassed and told her not to pay attention to it. She was surprised when he declared that he had to apologize to her. He remembered the night he carried Lunacia in his arms to her bedroom. It turned out he saw an open book on the table and quickly glanced at it. The girl instantly blushed, trying to process what he might have read. She apologized and assured him that she had only read the page that was open. Knox even said that he found it adorable that she kept a personal diary. He looked at the girl and unintentionally compared her to a puppy. The man recalled the girl's written desire to see landscapes and decided to take her somewhere. He smiled confidently and promised to show her a beautiful landscape. After a while, he took her to a clearing in the middle of the forest. The girl tried to say that in such darkness, they wouldn't be able to see anything. He said that in that forest you couldn't see stars or the moon, but something he wanted to show her. The next instant, the girl discovered an abdomen shining intensely. Lunacia understood, amazed, that the entire forest was plagued by them. She was fascinated by a beauty whose existence she hadn't even suspected. The man said they were called moon fireflies and only came out at night. He gently touched the girl's back and asked her what she thought of it. It seems he got the surprise right, something Lunacia loved. Her smile shone so brightly that, inevitably, it cheered up the Marquis himself. Those fireflies were closely linked to the moonlit clearing she asked about. It was known because the grass that grew there possessed special properties. It was rumored that this grass performed miracles and that there were magical stones in the forest. Lunacia instantly remembered reading a similar legend before. The time came when Knox decided to reveal his true motivation. He confessed that he was looking for that meadow on the orders of the Empire's heir. Lunacia was shocked to realize he was talking about the future emperor. In an instant, she understood that Knox had a very important mission. He added that this stone could be offered as a gift to the Empress. Knox also clarified that his friend had asked him personally. During that time, they found a pair of stone tablets with ancestral ciphers. They believed they could find the location by deciphering them, but they found nothing. Lunacia wondered if she could help their mission succeed. The man noticed the change in weather and suggested returning to the castle. As soon as she called him sir, he froze instantly in place. He declared that he wanted to ask her to call him something else. Knox looked her in the eyes and reminded her that she would soon be his wife. It seemed Lunacia herself understood how strange the formal address was. He agreed when she proposed calling him Lord Knox. The man stared at her and said he would call her by her name. Lunacia suddenly felt warm and calm beside him. The man gallantly extended his hand and offered to accompany her. He argued that it was because of her blindness, which would make it difficult for her to move. The girl quickly agreed and offered him her hand in response. Time flew by relentlessly, and a month has already passed since that day. Lunacia's father faced new misfortunes again and again. He was tricked by the merchant from whom he bought the orchard. Due to a loophole in the contract, that territory fell outside his possession. He remembered, once again, that this wouldn't have happened if Lunacia were with them. His mother lamented how she wished Lunacia would return. Since she left, Solo's grades have noticeably worsened. Even little Cynthia stopped attending social gatherings. Unlike the others, Rosalind managed on her own and succeeded in business. Nicholas shouted that they had broken all ties with the Lottie family. He continued shouting accusations at Luna, the fugitive, for all their misfortunes. Rosalind listened to their conversation in silence, hidden behind the door. She wanted to leave, but her assistant brought her the month's sales. It seemed to foreshadow the young woman's disappointment, and he bowed respectfully. The results were so unsatisfactory that her face darkened. She furiously squeezed the piece of paper and realized she couldn't go on like this. It turned out she had been deceiving her parents about her business success. Meanwhile, her main source of success lived peacefully in the castle. A whole month has passed since she became free. One of those days, the girl hurried to speak with Knox. Lunacia ran to him and called him as they had agreed. She proposed reading his future before the expedition. To her surprise, Knox refused, saying they would take a safe route. He also recalled how, thanks to her, they avoided a dangerous wolf. However, Lunacia still remembered their agreement. As soon as she finished speaking, he gently caressed her cheek. He looked her in the eyes seriously and reiterated that he would not follow it. Furthermore, he remembered how she slept for 3 days after using her power. Lunacia understood he was right, but still started to refuse. His assistant quickly intervened and said that his little wife only wanted to help. He added with a smile that Knox's adorable wife had even prepared cookies for them. One of the soldiers said that Robert was jealous because she had gotten very close to Sierra. Knox thoughtfully watched as his employees praised Lunacia. He involuntarily recalled the girl's wishes written in her diary. Luna timidly admitted that she wanted to prepare cookies for others. Dan Knox calmly noticed that all his subordinates were crazy about her. He added that he had also really liked the girl's cookies. Lunacia lit up and sincerely thanked him for his compliments. Meanwhile, all the subordinates watched their boss happily. It was enough for him to look at them for them to pretend to talk about something else. Yurin approached the girl and told her that they would only explore the area with useful resources. This order came directly from the Crown Prince himself. Lunacia immediately supposed that he had a good relationship with Knox. The next instant, the Marquis mounted his horse and declared it was time to leave. The girl quickly placed her hand on her chest and said she would wait for them. Lunacia shouted at him as he walked away, asking him to be cautious. During his absence, the girl kept busy with various tasks. She was happy for the wonderful people surrounding her. Sierra announced with a smile that they had finally turned on the oven. Lunacia decided to make cookies and asked for a tray to be prepared. She understood internally that she really wanted to help all these people. She tried to see Knox's future in a year, but it was extremely blurry. After that, she slept for about 3 days, although she did not achieve the desired result. Her right eye became completely blind, and she couldn't see very far into the future. She didn't know how long it would take for Knox to notice her inability to feel. Fortunately, Lunacia could still see the immediate future. She turned and saw Sierra frozen over a bowl of gooseberries. Robert brought them after an expedition, but they turned out to be very acidic. Lunacia smiled radiantly upon seeing the girl's funny face of disgust. Sierra tried to dissuade her from tasting, but she was intrigued to test her feelings. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Jendel was reading the letter they had sent him. He turned and heard a messenger bird fly in through his window. The man supposed, with a smile, that it was a message from the Moon Devourer himself. He was happy, although he suspected that the letter itself was written by Yurin. It indicated that the search was proceeding as planned and that he would send a report soon. The next instant, he was shocked to learn that he had a fiancée. Yurin also indicated that the cold Knox was happy with her. The prince became enthusiastic upon hearing such happy news from his friend. Before, Knox didn't allow any woman to come near him in the slightest. The heir firmly decided that he had to meet such a marvelous lady in person. Meanwhile, the report for Knox indicated that Lunacia was not well. Sierra noticed with concern notable changes in her friend. She said that Lunacia had started behaving strangely since they prepared the cake. She even completely stopped drinking her favorite tea and eating sweets. Yurin immediately realized that the subordinates weren't receiving treats from her either. He realized this from the sad faces of all his soldiers. Knox kept pondering and discovered that she was eating less during dinner. All these factors indicated that her appetite had worsened. Sierra didn't know the details and thought Luna only had a slight indisposition. Knox concluded that he hadn't spent time with her in a long time. He decided it was time to leave the documents and handle everything personally. The man stood up from his seat and declared that he wanted to see the girl in person. Finally, he affirmed that it was his duty to be with his wife in difficult times. Yurin immediately thought that the womanizer he was, the Holy Knight Cavalier, had awakened. The man ordered him to be quiet and replied that he was young and reckless back then. It seems his threat worked on Yurin, who chose to remain silent. In a whisper, he told Sierra that back then Nox was a huge Casanova. The assistant smiled and said he was happy to see how happy Nox was becoming. It seems his words did not cause rejection, but quite the opposite. They made him reflect. He remembered how immensely happy Luna looked contemplating the fireflies. He thought he could make her happy if he could only discover what her desires were. Sierra smiled and suggested that Luna could use a change of scenery with him. She was implying that they go to the city together and spend time alone. They were interrupted by a maid, who announced the arrival of an important guest. She hadn't finished speaking when, suddenly, the crown prince appeared behind her. Nox squinted, as if his head hurt, and asked why he was coming just today. The prince replied that he missed her after receiving interesting news. Yurin quickly rushed to justify, sending a letter to the prince. Nox tried to remember that he hadn't asked for it, but Yurin thought differently. The prince winked and confessed that he came to see the young lady. The marquis quickly rushed to tell the news to Lunacia, who was shocked. The man added that the crown prince was waiting for her in the hall. Crown Prince Jendel von Lessenriz was an only child. He was quite liberal, intelligent, and very sociable. Lunacia was surprised that someone like that wanted to meet her. Nox threatened to throw out the prince if she didn't want him there. In response, she only asked for time to fix herself up a bit. She added that she didn't want to embarrass Nox or be rude. Nox wanted to retort, but in the end he decided not to stop the girl. The man wanted to add something, but suddenly he stumbled and froze. He decided to leave the room and told her to let him know if she got tired of the prince. Nox jokingly added that he would simply throw him to the wolves in the forest. This slight irony caused a smile in the girl that she couldn't suppress. After some time, she finally decided to meet the prince. She bowed and greeted him courteously, surprising him with her beauty. To her astonishment, the young man extended his hand and ordered formalities to be left behind. He smiled friendly and said he never liked them. After this, he told her to sit next to him to chat. Lunacia hurried to sit down and discovered that the rumors about him were true. The prince shrewdly asked how someone like Nox could have liked her. They both knew perfectly well that Nox wouldn't take just anyone as a wife. However, Lunacia couldn't reveal all the terms of their agreement to him. Shortly before their meeting, the prince had studied information about the Hassels. Based on ancient records, he knew that her family could see the future. The crown prince meticulously recounted the legend about her family's gift. Lunacia felt agitated, realizing that her secret was no longer a secret. Finally, she confidently affirmed that it was just a tale invented by her ancestors. The prince didn't care much about legends, considering he was looking for the lunar meadow. He decided to play along and told her that he wasn't surprised she was the fiancée. Before, her family hid their gift from royalty so as not to influence the empire's future. The prince unexpectedly added that he would have even proposed rejecting Nox and becoming his wife. This declaration sounded so surprising that Lunacia froze. Yurin immediately became indignant and shouted that this couldn't be. The prince slyly smiled and asked if Yurin was eavesdropping. Yurin reprimanded the prince for trying to snatch away his master Nox's happiness. He didn't even know that the marquis himself was listening to his words at that moment. He revealed his whereabouts when asked for confirmation. Lunacia anticipated Nox's future reaction with amazement. The man stepped forward and declared that he had chosen Lunacia as his future wife. Precisely for that reason, he considered rejecting her would be an unforgivable mistake. The young woman instantly replied that she hadn't even considered such a thing. Before, everyone only saw her abilities, but by his side she was truly happy. The prince finally found what he longed for and admitted he doubted Yurin's letter. He affirmed that his old friend, for the first time, was obsessed with a woman. Nox severely demanded silence and reminded him that he already had a fiancée. His father had already approved of that young woman as the future empress of the kingdom. Nevertheless, Jendel only saw a political marriage and wished to have lovers. With that phrase, Lunacia recognized the prince's peculiar sense of humor. If it weren't for that, she would think they discovered her and would take her away for her abilities. Finally, he raised his hand and declared that he wanted to hand something over. Nox was surprised to see an unknown letter in his hand. It turned out he came to deliver a letter from the emperor himself. In it, the emperor lavished praise on how happy he was about Nox's marriage. He also wanted them to marry directly at the palace, and was even willing to cover the expenses. Before he could react, Nox snatched the letter from his hands. He remembered that he had been granted the privilege of not obeying the emperor's orders. Gendel smiled again and said, "You don't say no to that." He added that if they didn't marry, the Hassel family would continue behaving so brazenly. Lunacia jumped instantly, asking what they meant by that. The prince declared from afar that they still hadn't gotten over her departure. High society still didn't believe Knox's marriage, but the Viscount was taking advantage of it. He proclaimed far and wide that his house was under the protection of the Ilterns. Lunacia couldn't believe he dared such impudence. Knox was just as surprised, but decided to play it down and asked again. He deliberately said that he married his daughter to extort money from relatives. It seems the Viscount decided to seize the moment and draw attention to his family. He supposed that, due to the isolation, the Marquis wouldn't find out about those rumors. Lunacia felt shame that those people were still trying to get something. She couldn't believe they called her their beloved daughter in public. Knox noticed her sadness and said he would take care of them himself. The girl was ashamed to cause Knox so much trouble. The prince added that the bride's family must be at the wedding. They had to show that Luna had broken all ties with her family. Gendel liked the idea and agreed that they should teach them a lesson. Gendel said he looked forward to seeing the carnage between Knox and Lunacia's ex-fiancé. After his words, Luna realized that the prince had studied her thoroughly. She threateningly asked what choice they would make, as if dragging her into an adventure. Knox and Lunacia looked at each other tensely, as if weighing the decision. Finally, the man said they should agree, but he would consider Luna's wishes. Luna, in reality, did not want to see her family, but she agreed anyway. She firmly declared that she was ready to face them head-on. Her response satisfied Gendel, after which he predicted the ceremony would be a success. He said he would discuss all the details with his father and give them a concrete date. He affectionately kissed the girl's hand and asked her to take care of his silly friend. The prince angered Knox, who reminded him that he intended to leave there. Gendel called him grumpy and said goodbye before leaving without further ado. Knox touched his forehead tiredly, as if one more problem had been added. Instantly, a bunch of thoughts about the meeting flooded Luna's mind. Knox knew the decision had cost her, but he respected her greatly. Meanwhile, Cynthia thought about how much she loved her family. She loved that Mom and Dad always spoiled her so much. Even her sister, Rosaline, and brother Solil were always kind. She loved Lunacia even more, who always granted her wishes. Now she saw her father's shock upon hearing about the wedding of his daughter and Iltern. Nicholas hadn't stopped getting angry since Lunacia left home. The girl missed her sister, as life was harder without her gift. Besides that, she missed that attractive Marquis very much. Nicholas understood that his appearance would count, as Lunacia no longer being part of the family. That meant they couldn't hide behind the Marquis's name. The wife tried to scold her husband, but he ordered her to be quiet. Nicholas thought he could attract the attention of influential nobles. It seems Cynthia found out about her sister's future engagement for the first time. She decided she could see him at the engagement and make him fall in love with her. The little girl was sure that he would marry Lunacia for the gift, happy with her own idea. She burst into her parents' office. She gave them a smile and asked them to let her go to her sister's engagement. Meanwhile, Marquis Iltern was just talking about the preparations. Urin said they should start by looking for a dress for the bride. He insisted that Lunacia must truly shine on the wedding day. The assistant winked at Knox and proposed they go shopping in the city. The girl froze when Knox declared he was willing to go to the store. The man decided to insist and said he wanted to go with her alone, just the two of them. Lunacia instantly remembered how much he hated being in public. Knox replied instantly that he didn't care and that she shouldn't worry. Urin smiled slyly and said he should practice inviting ladies out for a walk. Knox controlled his anger and stood up calmly. He approached the girl and told her he would like to go for a walk with her. The man proposed it so directly that she even blushed. He noticed her confusion and asked again if she would accompany him. Lunacia quickly agreed, and then she thought about how she should look. Finally, they went out to the city, which shocked her with its beauty. She thought it would be lively, but it turned out to be much quieter. Knox said that currently his brother managed the residence in that city. In this way, Lunacia accidentally discovered she had a brother. Due to the avalanche of thoughts, she didn't immediately notice the outstretched hand. She was surprised when he offered to take her hand before entering. Knox explained by saying that she couldn't see well and might get lost in the crowd. She understood it was a simple gesture of kindness, but she still felt uncomfortable. The girl offered her hand in response, feeling her heart beat strongly. And so, holding hands, they ended up walking together to the store. A few minutes later, the shopkeeper called them, referring to them as a sweet couple. The man smiled radiantly and asked if they wanted some fresh apples. He started telling them how delicious and sweet the apples had ripened. The shopkeeper handed an apple to Lunacia and offered her a taste. The girl was so taken aback that she even forgot she had partially lost her sense of taste. She quickly took a bite so as not to raise suspicion. Lunacia didn't know what to do and decided to fool everyone with her smile. The shopkeeper noticed her smile and said she shouldn't let Lord Knox realize it. Knox ignored his words and pulled Lunacia by the hand. He dragged her so fast that he instantly dashed the man's hopes. The Marquis shoved her into an alley at full speed, visibly annoyed. The next instant, he scared her. He pinned her against the wall. She didn't understand why he had suddenly become furious. Knox sentenced that he hates being lied to and that he notices it instantly. The young woman tried to explain that she didn't understand, but he ordered her to stop pretending. He looked her straight in the eyes and blurted out that he could see her completely. Knox reminded her how unnatural her reaction had been. He explained that he had spoken to the shopkeeper and had given her a rotten apple. Lunacia was so shocked that she accidentally dropped the apple. She didn't know how he would react if he discovered she was losing her 5 senses. Luna feared that he might send her back home to her parents or forbid her from using her powers. She didn't like either option, as they could strip her of everything. Before, no one had cared for her as much as he did. The man sighed tiredly and said he suspected she was hiding secrets. He asked her to answer honestly why she wanted him to kill her in the future. It seems that question managed to catch the girl by surprise, leaving her speechless. The Marquis was determined to get an answer, but his younger brother called him. A smiling boy named Suck immediately directed his gaze towards him. He quickly took off his hood, announcing that he was conducting an inspection. His arrival surprised Lunacia. He didn't resemble Knox at all. One look was enough for the girl to decide to introduce herself immediately. She bowed respectfully and introduced herself as Lunacia Hassel. She was about to apologize for being in that place, but he stopped her. He bowed similarly, expressing his great joy at meeting her. Unlike Knox, his tender smile was absolutely devastating. He reminded her of the little squirrel that Salai once caught in the forest. Suck was ecstatic that his stern older brother had found a fiancée. He smiled and confessed how eager he was to meet her. Luna couldn't even respond in kind, and Knox was already telling her to leave. As if he didn't want to talk, he hurried to leave and told Suck not to stay in the alley. The boy lowered his head and blurted out, "Knox doesn't even show up at home anymore." He called His Majesty's order about the plant in the Lunar Meadow Madness. Lunacia also didn't see the logic in all this being just a gift for the Empress. Before, she thought this search was just a whim of the Empress herself. Suck asked if there might not be some other reason behind all this. Knox calmly replied that even if there was, it didn't concern him. The young man protested and said he wanted to reclaim everything that belonged to him by right. He sadly declared that he was absolutely incapable of leading the people. Knox was surprised and said he planned to give him the position of head of the house. Suck wanted to correct him, but Knox added that it was his mother's wish. As soon as he finished speaking, his health condition drastically worsened. Lunacia instantly hugged the boy, worried about his health. Coldly, Knox advised him to run out and get some fresh air. After this, they carefully accompanied him to the main street. Lunacia froze upon spotting her older sister in the distance. She tried to understand the reason, but then thought it was a hallucination. Suck coughed, and she instantly asked him to breathe deeply and slowly. Knox asked about his guard and about the unruly fiancé he was with in the city. Suck didn't manage to answer when they heard the indignant voice of a girl. The quiet young man's fiancée crossed her arms and glared at them. She started scolding Lord Suck for fleeing so suddenly. She addressed Lunacia with contempt and ordered her to remove her hand from her fiancé. Suck demanded that Ruby not speak to his brother's fiancé in that tone. She quickly took the boy away when he said they had taken care of him. The girl promised to give him medicine when they returned to the carriage. She contemptuously called Knox and wished him to wander forever searching for the lunar herb. She added that their future son Consuk would be the heir to House Iltern. It seems Knox knew the girl's unpleasant character, so he didn't react. Alone, the man revealed to her that she was the only daughter of Marquis Fand. Lunacia immediately tried to recall that very familiar name. Finally, she remembered that his wife was a central figure in high society. Luna's mother desperately tried to connect with her, but it was useless. Knox decided to hurry the girl along as they had wasted a lot of time. She squeezed his hand, realizing that she had managed to hide her secret anyway. She quickly corrected herself, as it was Knox who allowed her to do that. Now it seemed unfair to her that she was hiding such an important detail. The girl firmly decided she would tell him all her secrets, but later. In the end, they ended up entering a luxurious jewelry store. The consultant greeted them with a smile and began talking about the product. Knox immediately asked them to simply show him several sets of jewelry. Lunacia tried to dissuade him from the purchases he was making for her. The man suddenly confessed that he liked dressing and adorning her. She found it so amazing that her face instantly flushed. Meanwhile, the consultant had just brought precious top-quality jewels. Lunacia, immediately, enthusiastically began observing each one. Suddenly, she remembered her older sister, whom she had seen earlier. Luna still couldn't understand if it was her or just someone similar. At that very moment, a scandal was about to erupt in Rosalind's shop. After thoroughly studying the competition, the girl opened the door with disappointment. Her subordinate instantly got scared and started flattering his boss. Rosalind severely ordered him to be quiet and said her shop was full of customers. She handed him a report and demanded an explanation for the drastic drop in sales. The man bowed and said he had followed her instructions. He was so scared that his body trembled and weakened involuntarily. Rosalind was furious because she could no longer use Lunacia. She turned around and informed the man of his dismissal. He begged her to change her mind, but she was absorbed in her thoughts. The girl gloomily opened the door to her office and saw a pile of papers. Thoughtfully, she grabbed the first paper she found on the table. On it was the drawing of that very ghostly plant. She was sure that, after finding the jewel fruits, her sales would skyrocket. The young woman smiled maliciously, determined that that herb would be hers. Meanwhile, Ilterna's castle trembled with shouts of joy. Sierra was delighted with the purchases they managed to make. The maid was ecstatic seeing how beautiful Lunacia looked. Every outfit was so dazzling that they struggled to choose one for the banquet. Sierra was as nervous as if her life depended on that choice. The girls smiled and suggested taking a break before the next try-on. Lunacia couldn't reply, as Sierra had already run out to prepare the tea. Lunacia herself decided to take off the dress so as not to stain it accidentally. The young woman stood thoughtfully in the middle of the room, filled with luxurious gifts. In the Hassel family, she was the only one who was hardly ever bought new things for. Precisely for this reason, the stern Marquis's words impacted her so much. Although the phrase seemed overly elaborate to her, it still brought a smile to her face. As soon as she heard that characteristic sound, she hurried to turn around. She thought it was Sierra, but she accidentally bumped into the Marquis himself. Apparently, she was so stunned that she even forgot about her appearance. The girl quickly hid her underwear from her future husband's sight. Knox should get used to the sight of the female body, but he still blushed. He said aloud that he would turn around, and then asked if it wasn't better for her to leave. After that, he noticed a birthmark on her chest, resembling a clock. After hearing the story of that mark, he reflected on how hard it had been for her. The girl nodded and said that initially it was just an accessory for her heir brother. Since then, they hadn't valued her at all, until she gained power. After that, they started paying attention to her, which could only please her. She smiled bitterly and added that they treated her only as a useful tool. Knox analyzed her words thoughtfully and said the comparison was accurate. He looked her in the eyes and patted the sofa next to him. Lunacia still felt confused, but finally sat down next to him. After a short silence, Knox confessed that his mother treated him the same way. That unexpected confession left Luna so stunned that her mouth dropped open. She was eager to hear more, but Sierra suddenly burst into the room. Her face flushed with shame upon seeing the couple sitting together. She immediately tried to throw out Mr. Knox, claiming he shouldn't be there. Knox tried to explain, but she was convinced of something else. In the end, she pushed him out of the room, shouting for her mistress's honor. And so, the owner of the mansion was expelled by his own maid. The man sighed tiredly, realizing he had almost messed things up. That desire to share made him realize he had grown fond of Lunacia. Lunacia's original request to die still haunted him. Finally, one more day passed, after which the long-awaited ceremony arrived. The newly married couple, elegantly dressed, proudly strolled through the emperor's palace. All attendees watched the newlyweds eagerly. Many of them saw Lunacia Hassel for the first time and were surprised. Only the crown prince smiled contentedly looking at the couple. The aristocrats present eagerly discussed who had lived in seclusion for so long. They were not ashamed to talk about Luna either, whose love her father had so loudly proclaimed. Hearing that conversation, Lunacia began searching for her family with her eyes. Nox caught her thoughts and suggested going towards Jendel. He was the one in charge tonight, as the Emperor did not appear. Lunacia analyzed the new information and agreed. She wanted to move forward, but stopped upon hearing a familiar voice. She narrowed her eyes with contempt upon seeing that hateful face. In front of her was Rondel, her humiliated ex-fiancé. Meanwhile, Solil and Cynthia were waiting for their sister. Cynthia thought of Marquis Iltern and called her brother. She spread her arms and asked if she looked pretty today. Solil was amazed by that question, which she had been repeating since the morning. Cynthia shouted that tonight had to be unforgettable. Furthermore, her mother and Rosalina hadn't shown up, and her father wouldn't stop bowing. Solil had no choice but to accept his heavy burden as a babysitter. He, like everyone, believed that before Luna's departure, their family was perfect. Meanwhile, Rondel kept glaring daggers at the new couple. Lunacia never imagined she would run into him before her family. Rondel decided to break the silence, noting that the bride looked even more beautiful. He said he forgave the spectacle she had put on and suggested she reconsider. Lunacia felt anger invading her and repeated what she had just heard. She glared at him with her icy tone, asking exactly what he meant. Rondel turned red and confidently asserted that she still loved him. The young man approached the girl, as if wanting to pressure her. He whispered in her ear that he could tell everyone her secret. The girl looked at Nox and was glad she hadn't married Rondel. To the useless ex-fiancé's surprise, the girl only smiled sweetly. He immediately lit up, thinking she finally understood her mistake. She only greeted him coldly, as if nothing connected them. His formal tone abruptly brought him back to reality from the sky. The girl added tiredly that their engagement was annulled, and she didn't wish to maintain contact. Rondel pointed at her with his finger in surprise and said she herself had wanted it. He was just about to attack the girl when a firm hand rested on his shoulder. He gloomily asked the weakling if he dared to threaten his wife. Nox threatened him with destroying his house if he messed up again. He added that no one would believe his story about the Hassel family's gift. Nox recalled that Rondel was about to be expelled from the 2nd Division due to mistakes. Rondel got even more scared upon seeing that Nox even knew that. The man only declared that, from now on, he would be chased by bad luck. He glared at him and warned him not to come near his wife anymore. After this, he returned to Lunacia and told her he had wasted time. The man gently caressed the girl's hand, as if it were a treasure. She responded with a sweet smile and told him he was right about that. They had already forgot about the persistent Rondel until they saw him behind them. The girl looked at him with contempt, as if he were a nobody. He started arguing that everything was wrong, and Luna should be his fiancée. Rondel shouted with disappointment that, if so, his future would be perfect. He bit his lip in frustration and pointed directly at the Marquis. He couldn't hold back any longer and invited Nox to a duel. It sounded so arrogant that Nox felt deep disgust. Lunacia asked him, surprised, what nonsense he was saying. Rondel invoked the imperial laws, which allowed a duel to take place. Lunacia shouted that Nox didn't have to accept such nonsense. However, the man was willing to settle the matter once and for all. After a brief silence, Nox mentioned his words about a fair fight. He asked if he would resort to desperate measures upon being cornered. He laughed, adding that he would honor his courage and accept the challenge. Lunacia tried to stop his madness, but he ordered her to step aside. Amidst the chaos, the crown prince intervened by applauding enthusiastically. It seems he was the one who most expected something like this to happen. He gave them a radiant smile and admitted to having overheard their conversation. Lunacia immediately looked at Prince Yendel with concern. Yendel said that the most interesting things always happen around his friend and his fiancée. It seems he wanted to turn everything that happened into a spectacular drama. He smiled cunningly and said this was much more interesting than a simple dance. Rondel thought he could get justice and requested permission for a duel. He added that, in case of victory, he wished to be Lunacia's fiancé again. The prince waved his hand and said he approved of this confrontation. Lunacia was shocked by how quickly he had accepted that. Yendel looked at his friend, waiting for his conditions for the battle. Nox calmly said that his opponent must not dare to approach Lunacia. The prince accepted their bets and captured the attention of all the guests. He prepared to present the imminent combat to everyone with great eloquence. Yendel pointed to Lunacia as the cause of everything that was happening. He added that, because of her, those two men were about to fight a duel. The prince solemnly opened his arms, saying it was an opera scene. He named the sides, one of which was the knight and ex-fiancé. On the other side was a man nicknamed the Holy Sword. Nothing less. He declared that not just anyone would be lucky enough to witness this spectacle. All those present eagerly anticipated the future bread and circus. That's why Prince Gendel turned the duel into an entertaining spectacle. Lunacia had never seen Nox fight with swords before. Never. She began to worry, as fencing was Rondel's strength. She knew the rotten nature of her ex-fiancé. It seems Nox sensed that his own fiancé was worried about him. He smiled and said he wouldn't lose to that brainless brat. Nox added that it was all a farce that Gendel would handle. His words gave Lunacia confidence, and she said she would believe in him and watch. After that, Nox distanced himself, as if remembering something. Unexpectedly, he wanted her to tell him all her secrets if he won. Lunacia was stunned, as she couldn't bring herself to do such a thing. In the end, she gathered all her courage and accepted the proposal. The man looked calmly at the girl and extracted a promise from her. Nox smiled warmly and said he now had much more motivation. After some time, the preparations for the duel came to an end. All those present froze, awaiting the fight in the moonlight. He ordered weapons to be delivered to the duelists when they brought 2 identical swords. Nox immediately calmly took a normal sword, nothing special. Unlike him, Rondel's face showed much more tension. The prince decreed that the first one who fell to his knees would lose. Lunacia instantly looked at her opponent, who was very focused. Rondel told himself that Nox's abilities were a thing of the past. In an instant, he began calculating his chances of losing. He remembered that the division accepted him for his abilities, even if he used his gift. Rondel squeezed his eyes shut tightly, believing he was strong and invincible. He thought everything would return to normal after his victory. The prince announced the start of the duel, and their gazes met. Rondel let out a resounding yell and lunged at his opponent. He tried to hit him, but Nox blocked him masterfully. Everyone was pleased with the initiative of Count Eladi's son. The aristocrats trusted his incredible talent for fencing. Rondel's arrogance even unsettled Lunacia herself. Yendel commented that Nox, as always, wanted to show off in front of his lady. The prince said it would be very boring if Nox dealt with the boy immediately. Nox was just putting on a show for everyone, displaying his superiority. After those words, Lunacia understood that he was not fighting with all his power. The prince smiled and affirmed that even he could defeat Rondel. Nox could knock him out in one hit, but he preferred to teach him a lesson. The prince, cunningly, declared that even his iron patience had a limit. After those words, Nox, with a single blow, prevented his opponent from moving. In a split second, Rondel was on the ground, like an ashamed pig. Not even the wise aristocrats managed to see how Rondel ended up down. Rondel started stuttering, saying it was impossible. Nox coldly replied that his defeat was obvious from the start. He declared that he could not lose to a young man with no battle experience. Nox scornfully added that he should have trained instead of chasing Lunacia. Those words were the definitive burial of Rondel's honor. He also demanded that he not forget his promise never to approach Lunacia. Rondel didn't dare answer, and ashamed, he turned his head. After this, the prince solemnly presented the new victor to everyone. All the ladies immediately surrounded Nox, wanting to show their enthusiasm. Lunacia discovered, horrified, that even her sister Cynthia ran after him. She started telling how incredible he was and the euphoria she felt. The girl hurried to say her name, asserting that they already knew each other. She was trying to confess her feelings, but Nox left silently with Lunacia. It turns out the Marquise only cared about the praise of one girl. Lunacia smiled warmly and sincerely congratulated him on his victory. She also noticed that Cynthia wanted to speak to him urgently. The Marquis coldly replied that he was not interested in noisy damsels. Damsels? Lunacia confirmed it, as Cynthia had captivated every man before. Only Mr. Nox was able to resist her charms. The man brought her back to reality and reminded her of the terms of the agreement. The girl firmly placed her hand on her chest, swearing to tell him everything. Meanwhile, the knights continued to guard the bustling palace. They couldn't understand the cause of so much commotion and general excitement. It was ordered to reinforce the palace security, but no one showed up. The guards were unaware that a heavily armed criminal was hiding behind all this. His longing was to destroy the demon who destroyed his country and his father. The stranger smiled maliciously, wishing to take revenge with his own hands. Meanwhile, Lunacia just wanted to leave to be alone with him. Knox suggested they talk about it upon return and asked if she wasn't going to flee again. The girl smiled and replied that he had also become her home. She instantly wondered who else from her family had come to the reception. The crown prince approached them and praised the organized spectacle. He added that he expected nothing less from his best friend. The prince smiled and said that Lunacia had fallen in love with him again after seeing his duel. She met the man's expectant gaze and awkwardly replied that you could say so. The girl didn't know how to answer that question and felt embarrassed. The prince decided to ease the awkward moment and asked to speak with Knox alone. He explained that he would like to discuss the progress of the search for the lunar meadow in detail. Knox was displeased about having to discuss work at a party. He apologized and said that Gendel wouldn't leave him alone that easily. Lunacia smiled and replied that she could stay alone. Knox received her request not to worry with skepticism. In the end, the prince dragged him away, not without first praising his wife. Lunacia was happy to finally be able to eat. Due to the loss of taste, her appetite diminished and she was forced to lie. She lied to Sierra saying she just wanted to lose weight, but it only worried her more. That's why she decided to prepare at least a couple of bites. She hadn't reached the table when Sola lunged at her. He immediately started asking her how she was and if everything was okay. The girl nodded and hoped he was also well. Although he was her twin, their personalities were very different. He begged her, saying the whole family was waiting for her return. He implored her to confess if that terrible marquis was holding her by force. The girl wanted to explain about Knox, but they abruptly interrupted her. Nicholas greeted her with feigned joy and called her his beloved daughter. The girl immediately felt disgusted by that falsehood. He told her not to forget her family, who eagerly awaited her visit. He tried to show everyone how attentive and loving he was as a father. However, in his eyes, all you could see was that he wanted her to deceive her fiancé and come back. Lunacia would no longer submit to her family and had to put an end to everything. The girl cut him off coldly. I am no longer part of the Hassel family. Nicholas was so surprised that his face flushed with fury. She added that very soon she would become part of the Iltern family. The girl said severely that, from now on, there would be no ties with the Hassels. Nicholas's teeth ground as he added that his family would not help the Hassels. She said that, after the wedding, her fiancé would no longer give them his support. This way, she implied that they knew everything about what he was telling the aristocrats. It seems the attendees also began to suspect Nicholas's lies. The man turned around scared and instantly felt humiliated. Lunacia also asked him to hand over the document she had signed with Knox. The man attacked his daughter, revealing that he was posing as a marquis to protect them. He tried to blame her for ingratitude, but she firmly reiterated her words. Lunacia crushed his hopes, sentencing that they were no longer a family. She left, warning him that raising his voice would be considered poor manners. Before leaving the hall, the girl ordered him never to disappoint her again. After this, the girl appeared on the balcony, suddenly feeling the weight of fatigue. She was aware that she couldn't simply abandon the imperial palace. Lunacia decided to return, but then she heard an unfamiliar voice. She quickly turned around and came face to face with Knox's younger brother. He asked her to keep him company, claiming he felt dizzy. Lunacia couldn't refuse, knowing how delicate his health was. She was surprised that he came to the event alone, without his fiancé. She remembered that she had even seen his mother, Countess Fand. Lord Suk explained that he simply didn't like Knox. Lunacia smiled understandingly, accepting the girl's temperament. Suk smiled and said he finally managed to convince her and promised to come. He remembered how displeased she said she would be after work. The young man smiled, calling her annoying, and then decided to confess. He sincerely supported their union with his older brother and backed her up. He expressed joy that Knox had found someone who accepted him as he is. Suk added that his brother suffered a lot and wished him to recover his happiness. He noticed the girl's confusion and told her he would tell her a secret. The young man was about to reveal an old secret of House Iltern. It turned out that Suk and Knox were born to different mothers. Knox's mother was the biological sister of his own mother. Their father was officially engaged to her, but secretly loved Knox's mother. Because of this, their romance led to Knox's birth. After his birth, the father showed little interest in his fiancée. As soon as Suk's mother found out, her rage knew no bounds. She couldn't allow her sister to have a child by her own husband. The woman's prayers were heard, and her sister died while giving birth. Knox always said they were children of the same parents, but the stepmother couldn't love him. In a short time, everyone forgot about the eldest son's existence. Suk confessed that it was his mother who wanted him to take the place of the head of Iltern. By the rules, the position should go to the eldest. And Suk was born with fragile health. The younger brother calmly accepted that his father wanted to cede the position to Nox. He still felt indebted to his mother, as everyone except his father obeyed her. He even made a pact with him, so that the title would go to the first one to have a child. Lunacia instantly remembered the phrase Ruby said about children. Suk sadly added that, by his mother's will, Nox was sent to war. He remembered how happily he ran to greet his victorious brother. Contrary to all expectations, Nox did not return that joy to him. Suk noticed the change in his character and told him he should rest. His mother suddenly appeared behind him and ordered him not to approach. She insultingly insulted Nox and regretted that he hadn't died in the war. Suk saw Lunacia's shock and told her that his mother had always been like that towards him. That's why he wished Nox and Lunacia would have a child as soon as possible. This went against their initial agreement, making the girl feel the weight of responsibility. She blushed violently. She immediately understood the meaning of what was said. Suk didn't know that their marriage was for convenience and thought they were planning an heir. That usually happens after the wedding, but they had a different destiny. Lunacia remembered her gloomy future and knew she couldn't conceive. Suk noticed how long they were talking and asked them to take care of his brother. He even noticed how much Nox had changed next to Lunacia. Apparently, the girl didn't see any significant difference. She ignored a lot, but she wished to stay with Nox until the end. After those words, Suk smiled and hurried back to the hall. Lunacia observed the garden and discovered Cynthia by chance. She couldn't understand what her sister was doing alone in that place. The young woman seemed to be lying in wait for someone. Suk noticed Lunacia's surprise before she could leave. The young woman thanked him for the story and said she could only be there for him. Lord Suk smiled warmly and replied that that was enough. He sincerely asked her to become a true family for his brother. The girl could hardly promise it, but the young man had already rushed off. She had barely left the balcony when a frightened Solil ran towards them. He asked if she had seen Cynthia and then recounted how she had thrown a tantrum. She burst into tears over a lost earring and forced her to look for it. They told him to watch her, but as soon as he turned around, she disappeared. At that moment, Lunacia realized that Cynthia had been watching Nox's fight. The girl was going to tell where she saw her sister, but they were interrupted. A smiling teacher of the mischievous Solil appeared before them. The boy was stunned to see his former academy professor. He said he served with Iltern in the war and couldn't be absent. The man threateningly reminded him that Solil missed the combat exam yesterday. He began to intimidate Solil by telling his family about his poor attendance. The teacher added that he should follow the example of Lord Iltern. In an instant, he dragged Solil by the ear and told him he would make him retake the exam. Lunacia hurried to leave the lord and said she was going to look for her sister. Cynthia was a capricious child, but in the end, she always obeyed her sister. Suk didn't want to leave her alone and offered to accompany her. Lunacia smiled, saying his fiancé might get angry. In the end, she left in search of Cynthia anyway. She wandered the garden for long minutes looking for the girl. Due to her poor eyesight, Lunacia began to feel anxiety. Furthermore, she had also lost her sense of taste, which pressured her greatly. That's why she understood it would be impossible to be the Marquis's family and support. The young woman lived with the clear feeling that she would die in 6 months. The next instant, she froze in fear upon seeing a body lying down. In front of her was the guard with his back turned, who was supposed to protect the palace. The girl rushed to examine the body, discovering a large bloody wound. She didn't think about how serious his condition was until she saw his lifeless eyes. What she saw scared the girl so much that she couldn't contain a scream. She quickly examined his chest and realized that Cynthia might be in danger. Lunacia fell to her knees and didn't even notice the appearance of another man. It turned out to be Nox's smiling younger brother, who was looking for Lunacia everywhere. He told her how he found Cynthia fleeing after she left. She managed to find the earring, but her older brother scolded her. Lunacia exhaled in relief and understood that Cynthia was safe. The young man smiled again and said he decided to follow her to the garden upon hearing about it. He calmed her down, telling her that Ruby would only scold him for this. Their casual talk flowed so smoothly that they didn't notice the maniac. They only discovered him when the blade was already at Lunacia's neck. Meanwhile, Nox and Jendel were absent to discuss important matters. He asked if Nox believed in the existence of the lunar meadow. He only replied that they wouldn't know for sure until they found it. The prince laughed and said the man was optimistic as always. He sternly declared that he had little time left and the empire could collapse. Knox inquired about the current lamentable situation in the empire. He also recalled that the emperor and empress were absent tonight. Yendel only coldly replied that urgent matters had come up. After that, as if nothing had happened, he took another sip of tea. The prince placed the cup on the table and asked if Lunacia knew about the search for the lunar glade. Knox explained that she doesn't know the real reason and believes it's all for his fiancé. The prince congratulated him on deciding to hide the real truth. Cheendle understood that Knox feared everyone discovering his abilities. The prince added that he could have demanded her participation in the search. Knox took time to answer, as he did not wish such a fate for his wife. The prince laughed and asked him not to put such a serious face. He stopped Knox and told him that, to finish, he would give him some advice. There was no trace of his previous smile when he called him a hermit. He explained that after the battles, he had many enemies left who could threaten Lunacia. The prince ordered him with complete seriousness to be careful. Meanwhile, the life of the young woman herself was in danger. The menacing man asked if she was the fiancée of that demon. The young woman didn't want to answer his question and asked who he was. He smiled and introduced himself as a survivor of the kingdom of Chevalin. Lunacia recalled that this kingdom had declared war on them, but was defeated. The man gritted his teeth and said that Knox had taken the life of his soldier father. Before dying, he cried and begged to be allowed to return home to his family. Knox killed him without hesitation, and now the man sought to repay him in kind. The maniac shouted that, without fail, he would take revenge with his own hands. After the war, people yearned for revenge more than ever, unaware of what they experienced in battle. Lunacia was sure it was more complicated, but he wouldn't listen to reason. As if hypnotized, he kept saying he would take away what she valued most. He pressed the blade tighter and sentenced that it would be the life of his fiancée. Suk immediately demanded that he release the girl at once. Apparently, no threat affected him, and he rejoiced upon seeing Knox's brother. Knox, he said he would follow him to the afterlife right after the young lady. He seemed to have lost his mind, saying he had nowhere to return to. The girl unintentionally recalled how she begged to be killed if she was a burden. She saw that this boy was determined, but she also had a goal. She wished to stay with Knox until her 5 senses faded away. That's why she decided to read his future, to prevent everything from happening. As soon as her hand touched the maniac, she instantly saw new information. Fragments of Zook trying to protect her appeared before her. He will try to charge the maniac, and thus help Lunacia break free. However, in this way, he will bring about true death. Lunacia understood that this maniac would try to take both their lives. After this, the fragments of the future cut off, and she opened her eyes. She couldn't remain inactive while the maniac raised the knife over the Lord. He didn't know where the blow would land, but he wanted to protect the girl at all costs. Lunacia screamed when she realized he was about to be attacked. She ran towards the maniac and pushed him, thus gaining a couple of seconds. Then she took the Lord's hand and started running forward. She began to scream desperately about the murderer, hoping someone would hear them. Unfortunately, the Lord's poor health played a trick on him. He fell to his knees, on the verge of spitting up his lungs after the long run. Lunacia became even more frightened, seeing his face drawn from pain. She tried to find a solution for his shortness of breath. It seemed strange to her that there wasn't a single guard around. They should run towards the hall entrance, but Suk couldn't go on. He was willing to sacrifice himself, as long as Lunacia was saved. The girl couldn't tolerate that idea, and said they weren't going to abandon him. The young man said he would just hide in the bushes and catch up to her. Lunacia thought he might be lying to her, so she would leave sooner. She touched his hands and decided to check what would happen if she left. Immediately afterwards, she saw herself running towards the garden, leaving him alone. In the next instant, the maniac lunged at him and raised his knife. In the next image, she saw Lord Suk lying in a pool of his blood. She saw that he had no strength left, just like him. Despite this, she couldn't leave him alone awaiting death. She said she would distract the maniac so the Lord could escape. Lunacia added that he had a better chance of finding the entrance in the darkness. The Lord tried to stop her, but she moved forward resolutely. She asked him not to worry and said she wouldn't allow anyone to die. As soon as she heard the characteristic whisper, she lunged forward. She managed to get the maniac to pay attention to her and notice her. Lunacia ran with all her might, wondering if the Lord had reached the garden. She felt that with every second it became harder for her to run. The critical point for her was when she accidentally tripped over a stone. The girl collapsed instantly onto the ground, feeling pain all over her body. She had barely hesitated when a bloodthirsty maniac rose above her. He said with delight that she was very lively, for a common lady. The man smiled crookedly and said she would be his first victim. His face contorted with anger, swearing revenge on that demon. The young woman froze, awaiting the arrival of her end. Literally, in a second, Mr. Knox appeared in front of her. He stopped the opponent's attack and said he would beat him even with a practiced sword. As soon as he finished saying it, he snatched the knife from the maniac's hands. He took advantage of his confusion and quickly threw him to the ground. He didn't even need to use his sword to defeat the maniac. His normal blow was so strong that the man writhed in pain. He ended the fight when his boot crushed the maniac against the floor. He raised his sword and asked if he knew which woman he dared to touch. Knox added that he was very lucky his sword was made of wood. The maniac screamed when Knox placed the knife on his head and threatened to send him to heaven. The next instant, Knox abandoned him and rushed to take care of Lunacia. He touched her cheek and apologized for being late. Concern was reflected on his face as he asked if she was injured. The girl replied that everything was fine and then asked how he had found her. It turns out Solil made a scene because he couldn't find her. Knox had a bad feeling and went out into the garden, where he ran into Suck. At that very moment, Suck himself ran towards them accompanied by his fiancée. Lunacia immediately noticed the familiar figure of the young woman. It turns out she was the one who was supposed to discover the dead lord in the vision. To her surprise, Ruby thanked him that the lord managed to escape. The young man nodded and said he had been able to reunite with Ruby and Knox. After that, he began to speak with admiration about how brave Lunacia was. The girl looked down clumsily, trying to say she hadn't done anything special. Even the bold Ruby expressed her gratitude to her personally. It was very difficult for her to say all that, but she had no other choice. Furthermore, she also apologized for her disrespectful behavior. Lunacia didn't expect to hear that at all and was paralyzed. Knox explained that Ruby was worried about her and wanted to cheer her up. Ruby begged him to shut up and then called him unbearable. Lunacia smiled, realizing she had saved a life and received Knox's help. She felt the joy of gratitude, but her body was pierced by pain. Every new use of her power resulted in intense pain for her. Her head hurt so much that she started howling desperately. It hurt so much that she was on the verge of collapsing onto the ground. Lunacia clutched her head, feeling like someone wanted to tear off her ears. In the end, she woke up only a couple of days later in her own bed. She quickly tried to recall the circumstances of the past. She remembered that they had arrived at the ball. After Knox fought Rondel, Lunacia, step by step, tried to reconstruct the lost memories. Finally, she managed to reach the moment they attacked her. She immediately clung mentally to that important event. The girl remembered that Mr. Knox protected her, but she couldn't recall other details. She tried to understand what happened next, but Sierra interrupted her. Lunacia turned her head to greet the maid. Sierra was on the verge of crying with joy upon seeing the young woman. Suddenly, she realized she couldn't hear a single word from the maid. As soon as the maid understood this, she ran towards Mr. Knox. Seeing this, Lunacia finally understood everything that had happened. She touched her ears and concluded that she had lost her hearing. This was because she predicted the future 2 times in a row. Before, she thought she was prepared, but reality was much worse. In an instant, she felt disconnected from all reality. A few minutes later, Mr. Knox burst into the room. He immediately noticed that the girl didn't react to his presence at all. The man gently squeezed her shoulder to let her know he was there. She, as if nothing had happened, turned and greeted her husband with complete normalcy. Knox didn't understand how she could smile so calmly. It was incredible. He didn't say another word and hugged the young woman tightly. Lunacia tried to imply what he was doing, but he remained in total silence. He loudly thanked God because she had finally woken up. The girl's shock was immense. Upon realizing she could hear Knox, he told her that 2 weeks had passed since she fainted in the garden. Still in his arms, she asked if she had really slept that long. He said bitterly that he thought she would never wake up. For an instant, he felt like she had left him forever. He said that even after so many deaths, he wasn't ready for hers. It was hard for him to express his feelings, but now he couldn't help it. He hugged her tighter and confessed that he didn't want to lose her. Lunacia blushed even more and said she was very happy now. She stroked his back and declared she was glad to hear his voice. He looked into her eyes, as if trying to piece things together. Knox mentioned that first he lost sight in one eye, and then he started hearing worse. The girl asked him, frightened, how he had managed to guess it. He said that she didn't even turn when he burst into the room. He wanted to continue listing her symptoms, but she forced him to shut up. She asked him to refrain from making any more assumptions. Lunacia smiled and reminded him that she promised to tell him everything herself. Knox nodded and suggested discussing the matter over tea. Lunacia didn't understand why they were sitting so close and intimately. The man leaned close to her ear and told her that this way she would surely hear him. The whole situation was so strange that even Urine left the room with an enigmatic smile. Knox decided to address the main topic of their meeting, the reason they gathered. The man deduced on his own that all these changes were the price for her power, so she decided to tell him about her imminent and sad future. Knox sadly understood the true reason why she asked him to kill her. The girl looked down and replied that he had thought correctly. Knox asked if her family really didn't see what was happening to her. He immediately realized it was obvious and then apologized. Sadness was evident in his voice when he said they were only using her. The girl explained that she simply wanted to receive his love. This touched Knox, so he only hugged his wife tighter. From her, he learned that she only had half a year left to live. Despite this, she felt relief to finally open her soul to someone. She couldn't guess how Knox himself would react. The girl expected at least a word, but he only moved her away a little. After that, he carefully got up and fixed his gaze on his wife. He quickly headed for the exit and asked them to wait a moment. He ordered Urine to leave and told him he knew he was spying. Urine timidly peeked through the door and said he was just passing by. Knox said he didn't care and ordered him to bring something from the expedition. As soon as Urine left, he turned back to Lunacia. He told her that the time had come to reveal his secrets to her. Knox decided to share what he had discovered about the lunar grass. He sat her back on his lap, ready to drop the information bomb. He stroked her hair tenderly, carefully changing the subject. While she was unconscious, they interrogated witnesses about the maniac. Her discomfort stopped the case, leaving the criminal behind bars. For now, Lunacia thought guiltily. She was slowing down the investigation. She tried to apologize, but Knox believed he was the one who should ask for forgiveness. It was he who put her in danger, because of his status and his power. To her surprise, Lunacia reacted. She didn't want to hear those words. She smiled, reminding him that they were family and that it wasn't his fault. He only whispered, fearing to lose her due to his own mistakes. It was like a cry from the soul, and he didn't want Luna to hear it. Incidentally, in the end, the royal family took responsibility for holding the criminal. They were the ones responsible for his infiltration, which is why Shendhill even sent a letter. During the interrogation, it was discovered that someone had helped him enter the palace. Lunacia immediately asked if he even had an accomplice. Knox said this accomplice was aware of the engagement reception. It was obvious that they simply manipulated him to assassinate the Empress. In the country, she was known as the Divine Protector, Michaela von Lessendres. Thanks to her military tactics, they obtained victory in the past war. Despite having many concubines, she was the one who gave the emperor a son. Many aristocrats were bothered by her great influence in all areas of the empire. Originally, Yendel expressed that theory right after the banquet. Yendel revealed that someone else was seen near his mother's room. The guards recounted that they saw someone at the entrance to the Empress's chambers, who was not expecting visitors. It is presumed that he managed to escape unseen thanks to the commotion in the garden. During the interrogation, the accomplice knew the Empress was in delicate health, and also a secret of the imperial family. Only people close to the imperial family knew this detail. Knox supposed it could be someone from the high nobility, closely tied to the royal family. Yendel ordered him to investigate personally and find the lunar glade. This task fell upon Knox's shoulders like a heavy burden, but he could not refuse. Lunacia was shocked to learn that Her Majesty was ill. Knox revealed that her serious illness was being kept secret. It was incurable, and the imperial family could only keep her alive. Therefore, the assassin knew the Empress would be unable to defend herself. They chose a moment when she would be most vulnerable. In case of a successful attack, it could easily be hidden as death by illness. It is very possible that the emperor's concubines were involved. Knox explained that this was the reason they tasked him with finding the lunar glade. Before he said he needed it for the most beautiful stone of all. He revealed that there are no stones there, but petals with healing properties. According to the writings, the petal tea could cure any illness. It turned out that the legend of the precious stone was just a trick. In the stone manuscripts, there was a story about a flower that revived people. Lunacia repeated the reason why they entrusted her with finding the lunar glade. Nox nodded and said that the flower was the only hope for the Empress's recovery. It not only cured illnesses, but also restored lost sight and hearing. The girl was stunned with amazement, trying to understand where he wanted to get at. Nox whispered softly that he wanted to save her from her imminent future. He confidently stated that he would find the flower and restore her lost senses. Lunacia looked at him surprised when he spoke about an inevitable future. She had no guarantee that the flowers would cure her, but she wanted to try. She longed to give her the bright future she deserved so much. Lunacia couldn't believe he would risk so much. All for her. She wanted to speak, but she dropped, lowering her head with guilt. Even so, the young woman thanked him for his concern and great kindness. She raised her eyes and said she would help him find the lunar glade. Nox accepted, but asked her not to abuse her powers. The girl smiled and asked him for a promise in exchange for her help. She begged him to take her life if everything ended up going wrong. Lunacia said it with such naturalness that her soul dropped to her feet. Despite everything, he couldn't deny her this old request. Urin returned and showed the object they had asked him to bring. Nox examined the slab and told Lunacia that he had already mentioned it. The story of the lunar glade was narrated on that stone tablet. The young woman immediately examined the stone tablet attentively. It was written there that the truth would be seen by whoever looked at the moon. Nox was amazed that the memories of Lunacia's ancestors were written in the same font. Urin rejoiced, as before it took weeks to decipher the lines. The young woman was very happy to realize she could help them. She considered it lucky to be able to help Nox without using her abilities. Urin wanted to say something, but suddenly burst out laughing. He said quietly that they looked more and more like a married couple. Urin secretly revealed that Nox had personally taken care of her all these weeks. Lunacia found it hard to believe she was so important to Nox. Urin hurried to leave when Nox started asking what he was whispering to her. Lunacia wondered if she could become a true wife for her husband. A week later, the girl was still working hard on the decryption. She was able to quickly decipher most of the tablets. She worked so hard that even Sierra could barely pull her away. A smile appeared on Lunacia's face, showing that she hadn't heard anything. The next instant, Sierra filled her lungs with air and shouted. Sierra said she understood her condition and was glad Nox found a cure. As with the Empress, Nox only revealed part of the truth about Lunacia to the servants. The maid mentioned again that they were waiting for her and offered to change her clothes. Lunacia still didn't understand the necessity, but she couldn't refuse. Shortly after, she discovered that Lord Suck and his fiancé had come to visit her. The young woman hurried to apologize for keeping them waiting. She admitted that she didn't even imagine they would decide to visit her. The Lord smiled happily and decided to ask her how she felt. Ruby said she didn't want to come to this remote place, but she came for an important matter. Lunacia could barely hear the newlyweds, but she understood them more or less. She decided to move directly to discussing the reason they were there. Nox appeared unexpectedly behind her and said that Ruby wanted to give her something. He pointed to a chest with his hand and said that his mother had fulfilled Nox's request. Nox reached out to the jewelry box and said he had it specially made for her. It turned out that he had arranged for it to be manufactured specifically for her. Lunacia was extremely surprised when she took the jewelry box into her hands. She scanned the strange object with her eyes. Thoughtfully and hesitantly, Nox explained that it was a hearing aid that would help her hear better. Ruby immediately shouted for them to stop flirting in front of the guests. It turns out they made a peace treaty with the kingdom across the seas. In exchange for peace, they pledged to help each other, even with technology. This device allowed the hearing impaired to be on par with others. Lunacia continued examining the peculiar device with curiosity. Duchess Fand manufactured it, who had many influential contacts. Nox personally wrote her a letter with a request she couldn't refuse. Ruby, shamelessly, asked that they consider it her gratitude for saving the Lord. It seems Lunacia was still impressed by this unexpected surprise. Lord Suk tried to explain gently that it was a gesture of gratitude from Ruby. Nox sighed tiredly, not wanting to add anything to this peculiar situation. Lunacia smiled happily and thanked them for such a nice gift. As evening fell, the young woman found herself alone in her room. She was happy to have managed to get a little closer to Ruby. Now it seemed to her that they complemented each other perfectly with their personalities. Lunacia herself worked hard to finish her work with the cipher. Suddenly, she remembered the letter she had received earlier. Solil had decided to contact her after that incident at the banquet. His whole family knew about her fainting, but only Solil was worried about her condition. She smiled, thinking it was worth at least maintaining contact with him. The girl froze when she suddenly heard a clear knock on the door. Nox entered and noticed that she could now hear even alien sounds. Lunacia smiled and said she heard everything as if she had never lost her hearing. He sat down and said that Ruby doesn't know the real reason why she needs the device. The man added that he won't help her if she ends up losing her hearing. He lowered his head and said he could only fulfill her wishes. The girl blushed, realizing that he still remembered that diary. The man nodded and said he had already fulfilled one of those wishes. He asked her to tell him if there was anything else she wished for. At first she was surprised, but a bright smile lit up her face. She sincerely declared that she would be very grateful if he lived these moments with her. At that instant, she looked so adorable that the Marquis's heart trembled. She noticed the change in his mood, which he tried to hide immediately. He said everything was fine, but his face burned with an intense color. Nox added that before that, they needed to visit a person. It turns out the Empress wished to meet her outside the palace. She was surprised to learn that the Empress wanted to apologize in person. Meanwhile, Lunacia's father kept drinking alcohol nonstop. After another bottle, Nicholas resembled an animal more. His wife tried to explain the damage to his health, but nothing mattered to him. Upon discovering his deceit, even regular customers abandoned his family. It got to the point that even Rosalind abandoned them for no reason. His monologue stopped just as the maid announced a client. Drunk as he was, Nicholas didn't understand at first who had arrived. The maid tried to introduce him, but he cut her off without hesitation. The man hid his face behind a hat and apologized for the visit. Nicholas suddenly stood up, incredulous that such a gentleman was in his house. The man waved his hand and said his client would pay generously for the deal. Nicholas froze when he added that this assignment was top secret. He smiled maliciously, and he revealed that it involved the imperial family itself. Meanwhile, Yendel was once again checking on his delicate and sick mother. No one has yet found the cure to save her from this illness. He wanted to help her, but she refused and reminded him that Lord and Lady Iltern arrived today. Yendel accepted and said it was a great honor for them to see her. The woman asked him to call the servants to help her dress. He tried to explain to her that she shouldn't exert herself in her condition. The woman smiled at her attentive son and told him she would be fine. She added that she must survive for her beloved kingdom and son. On the way to the Empress, Lunacia asked if he had seen her before. Nox described her as a woman of good heart, great intelligence, and cunning. Lunacia asked him to tell her how he became friends with Shendhol. He recounted that he was studying at the Knights Academy when they met. The best students were summoned to train at the palace, where he arrived with Urin. Including him and Urin, 30 more students arrived. It was then that Nox ran into a spy who wanted to attack the royal son. Nox managed to neutralize him, and that's how he caught Jendel's attention. The young man recounted that the spy had behaved suspiciously from the beginning. As soon as Jendel heard this, he burst out laughing and called him glorious. The man looked cautiously at the prince when he named him future head of Iltern. After that, the prince smiled and said he liked him. He extended his hand and called Nox the most common guy, who is not interested in fame. Meanwhile, Nox befriended Urin, and together they marched to war. He was the fourth son of an imperial general, so he would not inherit command. Lunacia was surprised that they had all known each other for so long. Shendhol's mother personified the best virtues of her son. With the thought that she had little time left, Lunacia got out of the carriage. She looked around, contemplating the incredible beauty surrounding her. Then Nox took her hand and led her to the meeting point. In such a beautiful place, a mansion had been built for the Empress. According to Nox, the Emperor built it so she could rest there. The romance was overshadowed by the possibility of an assassin among the loyalists. Nox stopped dead and asked Lunacia to stop. The girl froze, listening to everything around her, surprised. She turned and suddenly discovered two strange people. She discovered a woman who was one of the Emperor's concubines. Unlike the concubine, Lunacia could not identify the man. He examined Nox carefully and said he did not expect this meeting. The man took off his hat, as if showing empty respect. He said it was unusual to find the Hermit Marquis on the estate. The man asked if they had come to see the Empress herself. Lunacia suddenly realized she knew this man. Before her was Marquis Latria, with the same weight as Nox. Furthermore, the Marquis and Her Majesty had been friends for a long time. She also recalled that she had not seen him at the engagement party. Knox politely greeted the Marquis and nodded at his words. Marquis Lautria immediately began to ask the reason for their visit. Knox recounted that, during the reception, his fiancée was attacked in the palace. Lunacia was glad that no one knew about the incident and no new rumors arose about Knox. The Marquis smiled broadly and asked if this was why he hadn't come alone. Lunacia took a step forward and decided to introduce herself to the man immediately. She curtsied and introduced herself as Lunacia Hassel. The concubine's gaze changed upon hearing the surname Hassel. Lunacia noticed her bewilderment and asked if something was wrong. The woman covered her lips with a fan and apologized. Knox decided to ask what brought them to the mansion. It turns out he came to meet the emperor on political matters. The concubine mentioned that she confused the date of tea with the empress. Lunacia was surprised that the empress was fulfilling her duties while sick. The Marquis hurried to leave, claiming a meeting with Her Majesty. As soon as he left, the smile completely disappeared from his face. Knox and Lunacia bowed before Mrs. Rivian before leaving. The woman examined them carefully and then waved her fan, ordering them to stop. She addressed Lunacia and told her she found her interesting. Rivian invited her to attend a tea ceremony as her guest. Lunacia instantly felt that something murky was hidden behind her words. However, she could not refuse the concubine of the emperor himself. She bowed politely and said she would gladly keep her company. Lady Rivian smiled in response and took her leave. Knox watched her leave and commented that he knew how hard it was to refuse. Nevertheless, he stated that he, in Lunacia's place, would have refused the offer. Rivian was the favorite among the three concubines and was distinguished by her rough character. Knox believed she sent those assassins to the palace. Lunacia froze, realizing the mess she got herself into. Knox added that, despite Lautria's support, Yendel still didn't trust him. The young woman never imagined that palace life would be so tense. She recalled having heard her name once at the Hassel house. Lunacia tried to remember, but her attempts were in vain. On the way, a guard informed them that they were already being expected. The newlyweds looked ahead firmly as the doors opened. The young woman's gaze began to eagerly examine the interior. Contrary to what she expected, a beautiful woman was sitting in front of her. Miquella greeted Lunacia with a smile, like a lady who sees the future. That phrase seemed like a nightmare to Lunacia, as she didn't want it to happen. The woman noticed the shock on Lunacia's face and hurried to say she was joking. The girl froze, not understanding how she should react to that. The empress said that Shendhil had told her about the legend of the Hassels. Lunacia began to analyze whether the prince had told her anything about it or not. Knox hurried to change the subject and greeted her with utmost respect and courtesy. Miquella asked them to forget the formalities, which she always hated so much. Lunacia again noticed how much Shendhil resembled her own mother. Miquella's good character admired her so much that a smile appeared on her face. The empress got up and decided to offer personal apologies. She smiled sweetly at the newlyweds and invited them to sit nearby. Afterwards, they began to have tea in an atmosphere of complete calm. Miquella apologized for the lack of preparation of her guard during the attack. She added that the fault was entirely with the royal family, and they regretted it. Lunacia asked her not to apologize and said that no guest was injured. The only exception were the members of the royal guard. Miquella promised to do everything possible so that the tragedy would not repeat itself. Unexpectedly, she declared that finding the traitor was proving very complicated. Thus, she made it clear that the attack was directed straight at her. Lunacia was shocked by the confidence Miquella radiated. She also thanked Knox for his efforts and praised his wife. Knox replied calmly that he loved hearing praise for his wife. Lunacia blushed at the shameless way they praised her. Miquella smiled and said there was no need to thank her for telling the truth. She sincerely declared how happy she was to see them that day. Miquella added that, due to her condition, she rarely could organize events like this. She smiled and said she wanted to have tea with them again soon. Alone with Knox, Lunacia shared her first impressions. She noticed the obvious resemblance between her and the sun. Knox calmly replied that, apparently, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Lunacia wished to return home to resume her previous activities. To her surprise, Knox declared that it was not yet time to return. She remembered how her wish for a stroll was written in his diary. Knox didn't know how to achieve it and decided to ask Urin for advice. He was also forced to consult Gendel to make a decision. In the end, he decided to set everything aside and leave once and for all. Knox extended his hand and said that place was very close. Meanwhile, the emperor's concubine analyzed the meeting. She extended a leg upon being informed of a guest's arrival. Rivian ordered her to enter upon learning that Rosalind had arrived to see her. The next instant, the young woman burst into her room and stopped dead. She said she had brought her the most exquisite jewels that existed. Rivian doubted, reluctantly, that those trinkets deserved her attention. She added that Rosalind's ambition truly amazed her imagination. She smiled, saying that was the only reason she bought her merchandise. Rosalind smiled enthusiastically and called her most valuable client. She affirmed she wanted to hear that story, right before showing the jewels. Rivian was amused that the young woman believed in the tale of the moon glade. Rosalind was surprised that the woman began to take interest in that glade. Rivian replied alone that her persistence had inspired her, and she repeated once more that story about the precious gem. Rosaline said she would make the best piece for her if she found the glade. Rivian smiled enthusiastically, thinking about Rosaline's proposal. She casually said for the girl to make her a tiara. It sounded so confident that Rosaline's eyes widened. It was known that, in their kingdom, only the empress could wear a tiara. Rivian had great ambitions and wished to attain the status of empress. That same day she went for tea with the empress, but she got the date wrong. The empress received her in her usual manner, as they hadn't seen each other for a month. Despite everything, Rivian noticed how much she had changed. They said goodbye, and after that, she casually ran into Marquis Lautry. Their conversation only convinced her that Mikla was slowly dying. Rivian couldn't wait for that woman to leave this world. She desired it to be the next candidate for the throne. For this reason, she wanted them to make her a tiara. They also talked about how Marquis Iltern lives in the forest where the glade is. Rosalind was convinced they couldn't stop her from searching in the forest. Rivian found it convenient how intrepid and brazen she was. Rosalind froze when the concubine said she had run into her little sister. It turns out that, at first, the girl thought of Cynthia. Rivian clarified that that girl seemed to be of her own age. Rosalind bit her lip furiously when she realized it was Lunacia. Rivian told her she had invited her for tea as an honored guest. Rosalind pretended not to care, but inside she was burning up. Rivian smiled maliciously and pointed out that she didn't get along with her sister. She cunningly asked if she wouldn't want to put her in her place. Rosalind couldn't pass up an opportunity like the one Rivian offered her. The concubine skillfully manipulated the girl to achieve her goals. Meanwhile, Lunacia was taking a walk with Iltern. It seemed like he wanted to show her a spectacular field of flowers. They convinced Knox to join a daytime hike. Knox asked if it was the first time she was taking such a walk. The girl recounted that when she was little they wanted to take her, but she got sick. Her whole family decided to have fun without her and leave her at home. Only Solil thought of her and brought her flowers from the trip. It hurt her to hear her family talk about moments without her. Knox supported her and said he didn't have good memories of his family either. He smiled and suggested coming here with the others next time. Lunacia was thrilled with the idea and happily agreed. She was inspired by the scent of the dancing petals. A breathtaking sight, she longed to remember this instant, this moment with Knox. She would even accept death, knowing she experienced something like this. They moved away from the glade, and she asked where they were going now. The man pointed ahead, indicating that their next objective was there. The girl was surprised to understand where he was taking her. Meanwhile, Sierra hoped the newlyweds were having a good time. Yurin noticed with a smile how much Sierra adored Lunacia. The girl admired how Lunacia smiled every day, despite her illness. She could understand her, being the middle daughter in a large family. Even based on her experience, the youngest ones were always spoiled, and the older ones carried everything. However, the situation in the Lunacia family was different from Sierra's problems. Precisely because of them, the young lady was struck by an incurable illness. The girl was surprised to notice a strange commotion in the street. It turned out that the soldiers were returning from the expedition, and among them was her beloved. He decided to go find out if they had managed to find the lunar herb. Sierra decided to accompany him to see her Roberto. They suspected nothing until they saw something that left them in shock. Meanwhile, Lunacia was in the next stage of her walk. Knox took her to a church that hadn't been used for a long time. Gendel had told her about it, implying they should spend time alone. That's why Knox decided to show her a place with a lot of history. He said thoughtfully that only this place was special to him. The man asked her if she wanted to enter and touch the doorknob. After that, they both cautiously watched the doors open. Lunacia stepped forward and examined the interior attentively. Seeing it, it was hard to believe the church was no longer in use. Knox recounted that secret weddings were held there before. Right there, his father proposed marriage to his real mother. Lunacia was surprised at how easily he told her all that. It turns out that Knox suspected his younger brother might have told it. The girl agreed and asked for forgiveness for discovering his secret. He only said it didn't matter, as he intended to tell her anyway. He no longer wanted to hide that his mother had died giving birth to him. A secret relationship arose between his father and mother. A scandal. After a short pause, he said he did not approve of what his parents did. It was common among aristocrats, but it hurt him because of his brother's mother. Lunacia looked at her husband with surprise, as he spoke so calmly. She expressed that she understood their love was stronger than reason. Thinking of them, he decided he wanted to share that story with her. Lunacia's heart stopped upon understanding that he trusted her like this. The girl smiled sweetly and supported Knox's opinion. He asked if she didn't intend to judge them at all. Lunacia believed it made no sense, as they acted on impulse. The man smiled, thinking he had always dreamed of hearing those words. After a brief pause, he looked her in the eyes and thanked her. Knox smiled tenderly and expressed his joy at having brought her. In the end, they remained in the church until dawn. It was late to return to the mansion, and she suggested staying at a hotel. Only then did she realize that a lunar raven was flying towards them. The girl instantly feared that something might have gone wrong. Knox checked the contents immediately, and his face darkened. It turns out Robert's squad was searching for the lunar glade, but they returned in very poor condition. Lunacia was so shocked she couldn't say anything. The strangest thing is that the soldiers had no injuries. Knox apologized and said they had to go back home to investigate. Lunacia agreed without hesitation, thinking of her loved ones. All those people had become more important than her family in 1 year. Therefore, during the entire way home, she prayed for them to be safe. Upon arriving at the mansion, the newlyweds found great chaos. Urin apologized for having to interrupt their date. He recounted that he and the boys thought they would spend the night at the hotel. It seems Urin enjoyed joking about the air. Knox stopped him, threatening him with punishment for vulgar jokes. The man waved his hands and said they already had enough problems. After this conversation, they hurried to the room where the soldiers lay. Sierra called Lunacia instantly, while staying next to Robert. She apologized for interrupting their evening. Lunacia told her not to apologize and to explain what happened. Robert, with difficulty, said that his squad followed information from deciphered tablets. Thanks to them, they discovered a previously unexplored cave. The other soldiers covered their ears, remembering the horrible screeching of the bugs. Lunacia cautiously asked them to tell her about those bugs. They looked like moths, but had bright colors and red eyes. They didn't try to attack the soldiers, but they emitted a frightful screech. The sound was so horrible that they hurried out of the cave. Knox sat nearby and asked if they had reached the deepest part of the cave. He said they didn't manage it because of the moldy fungi, which emitted a disgusting smell. In this way, the soldiers were literally put out of action. There were no beasts in that cave, but nature seemed to protect it from outside eyes. Robert apologized for not being able to complete that task. He also apologized for interrupting their evening. Lunacia wanted to support Robert, but Knox cut her off. He said Robert did the right thing, since their objective was to explore the area. Robert managed to protect his companions' lives and keep them safe. Urin said that, although they didn't advance further, they obtained crucial information. There was a high probability that the lunar herb was hidden in that cave. Lunacia tensed up, realizing they had managed to advance so far. Urin added that they must prepare adequately for the next expedition. While reflecting on different options, an idea occurred to Lunacia. Everyone froze, seeing her hand extended upwards. The girl, with total seriousness, proposed sending her to that cave. Meanwhile, the emperor's concubine was enjoying her free time. She was drinking wine, accompanied by several handsome men. The woman looked ahead when a known man greeted her. He smiled and said he didn't expect to see her in a place like this. She replied that even noble ladies want to be alone. Rabian began to talk about how much she missed the peace of the palace. She also reminded him that he was the one who showed her this place once. Her eyes sparkled when she mentioned how they used it for secret encounters. The woman calmly put down her glass, stating that they needed to chat. Haughtily, she waved her hand toward the guard, ordering them to leave them alone. As soon as the guard left, she lowered her fan, inviting him to take a seat. The woman looked at her accomplice, anxiously awaiting the details. She asked how his plan to overthrow the queen was going. The man smiled with satisfaction and assured her that everything was proceeding perfectly. He added that he had even found powerful allies, though he hid their identities. He believed they should eliminate the empress while she was still weak. Rabian replied annoyed that he spoke as if she could be saved. She revealed that the woman was sick, and her condition worsened day by day. She was surprised to learn that, according to rumors, the prince was looking for lunar herb for her. The Marquis was surprised in turn to realize she already knew. The woman called it a coincidence that in the glade there was a stone imbued with magic. She smiled and mentioned that her personal jeweler was looking for it for her. The Marquis rubbed his chin with interest, as if glad about it. According to rumors, the prince commissioned Marquis Iltern to find that glade. Rivian said that no one forbade them from participating in the search. The concubine wished to find that glade first and keep the stone. Greed burned in the Marquis's eyes as he offered to find that glade personally for her. His words sounded so convincing that the corners of her lips turned up. Rivian pierced the Marchioness with her gaze and called it a tempting offer. Meanwhile, Lunacia struggled to get a chance to save the operation. As expected, everyone received her risky idea with apprehension. Nox said it was impossible, as she was not at all prepared for such missions. Lunacia explained that her illness made her immune to all those things. Her words were convincing, but Nox could not afford to take such a risk. Urin understood her desire to help, but all this seemed like total madness to them. Lunacia froze, realizing there was no turning back now. She didn't have much time left and wanted to be useful somehow. It seems Nox began to understand that she wouldn't give up on her idea. She squeezed his hand and said she couldn't miss this opportunity. She smiled and promised that she would definitely return safe and sound. Urin noticed how quickly Nox's mood changed. In the end, he agreed and gave her the necessary instructions. He told her she had 1 hour before he went out to look for her. After her thanks, Nox admitted that he simply couldn't refuse. He remembered her sweet smile again and said he would wait for her there. The man did not take his eyes off her, watching her walk away. Lunacia agreed with all his observations and rushed forward. The girl quickly concentrated, illuminating her path with a lantern. She also took off her hearing aid before moving forward. Lunacia's poor eyesight complicated everything. She didn't see the moths at first. She tried to convince herself that they were not going to attack her. Although they had an annoying screech, she only heard echoes of it. This way she managed to overcome the first part of the arduous path. As soon as she moved a little further, she discovered a moldy fungus. She could still smell that unbearable fetid odor. However, it was tolerable, since she had also lost some sense of smell. Even without using her gift, her 5 senses were slowly abandoning her. A few meters ahead, she realized she had advanced deeper. Looking up, she found something she clearly didn't expect. As expected, there was no moonlit glade in the cave, but another tablet. The girl approached slowly, hoping for another revealing clue. She put her hand in the water to check its depth. Lunacia quickly removed her boots so as not to get them wet in the water. Next, her bag with all her belongings ended up on the shore. With the water up to her chest, she approached the tablet on the stone. It indicated that a secret would be revealed to those who reached that far. She was amazed to read that the secret was about the location of the moon glade. Unfortunately, Lunacia couldn't take the tablet and had to memorize everything. With just a touch, Saz discovered a mysterious box. She examined it with a magnifying glass, looking for any hidden detail. Lunacia didn't understand how to open it. The key was a mystery. But wait, she discovered that it also had an inscription. It was a message to the owner of the gift, asking to flee without looking back. She understood only fragments, but the last message was clear. Lunacia sensed that her ancestors left that warning. She carefully hugged the box and engraved the message in her mind. Meanwhile, Nox and Urin couldn't calm their nerves. The man was ready to rush after his beloved without hesitation. Only after Urina's long reprimands did he calm down and stay still. They gasped when they looked again at the cave entrance. Lunacia was running towards them, safe and sound. Nox immediately ran after her to question her about what had happened to her there. He started taking off his coat while asking her if she was hurt. She wanted to share the good news, but he put his coat on her and said that could wait. Now it was important for him to make sure she could rest. The girl tried to say everything was fine, but he was unbearable. Urina smiled and said it was better not to argue with Nox now. She added that she could try to calm him down in her own way. Lunacia looked at the man and realized that all this time he had been worried about her. She wanted to move his hand away and change her clothes, but he didn't want to move an inch. The young woman turned and told him she would like to spend some time by his side. She loved feeling the warm touch of his hands and the concern floating in the air. She wanted to return to the palace and rest, to then tell him everything she had discovered. Finally, after a while, they returned before night completely fell. As soon as her carriage approached, Sierra ran out to meet her, very worried. Lunacia smiled and said the expedition had gone quickly and without major problems. Robert made a restrained bow and commented that they were still tormented by nightmares. Knox ordered Sierra to prepare a hot bath and clean clothes for the young woman. She ran to find the letter that arrived for Lunacia after her departure. The maid handed the young woman a letter with strange designs. Lunacia was surprised that anyone would even think of writing to her. It turned out the letter had been sent by a concubine during the night. She smiled maliciously, thinking she had to prepare well for the visit. She wanted to do it for her beloved friend Rosaline and the lunar glade. The woman smiled maliciously and mentally proposed playing a game with him. Meanwhile, Lunacia was changing after a bath. The cave was so cold and dirty that she froze to the bone. In the hallway, Urin unexpectedly called her as she left the office. He suggested they go in to talk to Knox. The man calmly asked her if she had finished her business. He asked her to sit next to him and said he was ready to hear everything she saw in that cave. She took a cup in her hands and told him about the map, which indicated the location of the lunar glade. Lunacia mentioned that it was engraved on a tablet, which she memorized. Unfortunately, she couldn't take it with her, so she could only memorize it. Knox smiled and stroked her head, telling her she had done very well. The girl blushed, feeling she still couldn't get used to his praise. She blushed so much that she didn't immediately remember what she wanted to tell. Lunacia mentioned that besides the map, there was a message on the tablet. The lunar glade only appeared on a full moon, which complicated their search. Confirming the next full moon date, they proceeded to analyze the box. Urin discovered it had a lock that opened in an unknown way. Lunacia suggested waiting before they advanced in the search. She placed the cup on the table and said that was all she could find out. Urin smiled and said they were now closer to their goal. Knox proposed discussing a new problem, an invitation from Rabian. They were surprised how quickly it had arrived, as the reception was in 3 days. Knox darkened and reported that he had a bad feeling about this. Lunacia said that their refusal would negatively affect the status of the Iltern family. Among the nobility, refusing someone of higher status was taboo. It was considered an insult and a lack of respect for the host. Lady Rivian was perfectly aware of this rule. Knox knew it was true, but being alone with Rivian was dangerous. He once even refused tea with Marquis Fand and his wife. His mother scolded him, which led Lunacia to new ideas. She firmly declared that, even so, she would attend that tea. Knox was saddened that he couldn't protect her even from the nobles. Lunacia only smiled and asked him not to talk nonsense, because they are family. The next day, the young woman left for the reception at the palace. She entered the room and greeted Rabian respectfully. Lunacia looked magical in her attire, impossible to ignore. What a surprise to discover that Rabian was alone. She never imagined that it could just be the two of them. Rabian smiled with forced sweetness and thanked her for the visit. Meanwhile, Solil once again decides to secretly visit Lunacia. Despite his letters, he still felt anxiety for his sister. Our father changed a lot and isolated himself, fearing the future. Mom seems trapped in memories, unwilling to talk to anyone. Even the charming Cynthia has become unrecognizable. She sought out Solil again to complain and share her anxieties. The girl burst into tears again, demanding confirmation that she is pretty. Solil repeated once more that she is, as always, gorgeous and charming. Before, his vanity always irritated her, but something has changed now. After the encounter with the Marquis, she lost her confidence and fell into sadness. He felt obliged to comfort her 10 times a day, repeating that she is beautiful and tender. Solil moved away from his sister upon seeing Rosalind approaching. He ran out of the room to talk to the young woman. The young man was glad of her return, considering the tension in his family. Rosaline, troubled, apologized, as if he were wrong in his conclusions. She said she was only coming back for her things and would leave soon. Solil thought he should talk to his father and snap him out of it. Rosaline replied scornfully that they shouldn't drag their older sister into it. She took advantage of Solil's confusion and left without saying anything. Cynthia ran to Solil and begged him to tell what she heard from her sister. However, he was so shocked that he could barely stand. He always believed they were a happy family, but Lunacia was right. Solil understood for the first time the real reason why she fled from them. Meanwhile, Lunacia found herself forced to endure Rivian's company. She hurried to sit opposite him and expressed her surprise. Rivian smiled and said he had decided to chat with her alone. Lunacia did not understand at all the true purpose of this meeting. Despite losing her sense of smell, she still perceived the heavy aroma of incense. Rivian confessed that he maintained a friendship with her older sister. Lunacia finally realized she had heard the concubine Rosaline's name. He added that Rosaline always shared stories about her family with her. Luna said that her sister told her she was the second princess of the kingdom of Alban. Rivian nodded and said she had become a concubine for the security of her country. His smile changed when he said he was not interested in concubines at all. He added that he was only in love with his wife and only gave them a status. After that, he noticed that Lunacia was not drinking the tea. Lunacia had to take a sip so as not to be considered rude. Rivian kept smiling forcedly, waiting for her to drink. After a pause, he said she was a little different from the other concubines. She stated directly that she wanted to change her position. Lunacia froze, trying to understand why her head was spinning. She immediately supposed they might have put something in her tea. Her vision began to blur, and she had constant hallucinations. Rivian stood up and supposed she was already feeling the effect. She explained that it was the effect of white incense, invented in her kingdom. The concubine stroked the girl, saying that the aroma alone made one confess anything. However, she noticed that it didn't work on her as it should, so she added the seeds to the tea to enhance the effect. She smiled, assuming she had lost her sense of taste, and that's why she didn't notice the bitterness. Rivian named Lord Knox, and Lunacia repeated after her. She glared at her, waiting for her to tell everything she knew about the lunar glade. After a while, she woke up with the idea that she had talked to Knox about the lunar glade. The memory of the drug and her image arose before her eyes. She raised her head and discovered that Rivian was looming over her. The girl did not expect to see her at all and jumped off the sofa. The concubine related that she fainted during tea time. Thanks to that, Lunacia could barely reconstruct the sequence. She grabbed her head, feeling her skull explode. At first, she attributed it to the accumulated fatigue of recent days. The young woman hurried to get up from the sofa and apologized. She bowed and said she had to return immediately. Rivian smiled maliciously and said she had a wonderful time with her. She said goodbye to the girl, hoping the occasion would repeat. Shendil accidentally spotted Lunacia from his office window. He didn't know the reason why she had suddenly appeared at the palace. He immediately felt that something was wrong, since the family didn't invite her to the palace. Lunacia scolded herself for falling asleep during such a meeting. She tried to recall the details of the conversation, but she was interrupted. She turned and discovered Lord Suk, accompanied by Ruby. The girl said she had come to the palace at the concubine's invitation. She was happy to meet the two of them after such a tense meeting. Suk mentioned that he was accompanying Ruby to invite His Majesty to dinner. Lunacia was immediately surprised when he mentioned the formal dinner. Ruby explained that it was an event her family organized every year. At the soirée, the cream of society gathered, and everything that happened in the country during the year was discussed. Lunacia remembered that her mother always wanted to go, but their family was never invited. Suk was extremely happy to have met her casually today. Immediately after, he took a letter from his pocket and handed it to the girl. Ruby immediately blushed when he told her he was giving the invitation to Lady Lunacia. Unlike her brother, Ruby did not wish to see Knox at the formal dinner. Lunacia decided to soften the situation and thanked Ruby for the invitation. Ruby pretended not to be embarrassed and tried to respond insolently. However, it was clear she was trying hard to be friendly. Lunacia quickly checked the invitation to confirm the event date. What a surprise she had to discover that the dinner would take place on the night of the full moon. She didn't know what to do with Lady Ruby's kind invitation. Ruby noticed the young woman's confusion and said she hadn't invited them out of friendship. Lunacia just smiled and decided to discuss it with Knox. The young woman didn't immediately notice the piece of paper that fell to the floor. She rushed to pick it up and discovered it contained a guest list. Lunacia carefully reviewed the list of invited aristocrats. She was very surprised to notice a familiar name. Lunacia didn't understand what her father was doing on that list, as he had never been invited. She went to Ruby to find out the reason for his presence. Ruby admitted that she didn't even know Nicholas was her father. She stopped to think when Suk asked who had sponsored the Viscount. After thinking for a moment, Ruby remembered it was Marquis Latria. This small detail surprised the shocked Lunacia even more. She didn't understand why such a man would get involved with her father. The young woman decided to find out if the emperor's family was invited. Lord Suk replied that they had invited the empress and her son. He added thoughtfully that he was very concerned about her highness's health. In their last meeting, it seemed to him that she was not well. Ruby scolded him, telling him that she was the one worried about his cough. She asked the servants to notify her if he became ill or acted strangely. Lunacia pondered her words about the empress's sickly appearance. She understood that their lives could be cut short in the not-too-distant future. She also had a bad feeling because of her father's protector. The young woman quickly folded the list and returned it to Ruby. She also modestly thanked her for allowing her to see it. Lunacia smiled upon saying goodbye and said she would wait for her invitation. Once alone, she continued reflecting on the latest events. The connection between Marquis Latria and Lady Rivian kept running through her mind. Lunacia thought about using her ability, but Nox might not like it. Only at the last moment did she realize she had gotten lost in the palace. The girl looked around uneasily, looking for an exit from the palace. She accidentally heard the clash of swords and thought of the knights' training ground. Lunacia hid behind a column and began to watch the knights. She was surprised to accidentally discover Rondel. It seems he was working hard on his skills after his defeat. He tried to attack in every possible way, but still ended up on the floor. Defeated, he demanded a rematch from her. It turns out he had become so energized after being expelled from the 2nd Division. Lunacia realized now that the last time she saw him was at the ball. Rondel stated that, because of that, his family had almost disowned him. However, his defeat truly served him as a valuable lesson. Only then did he recognize his insignificance and understand that he had achieved nothing. To her surprise, he admitted that he had achieved everything thanks to his ex-fiancée. Lunacia couldn't even imagine that he would ever think of that. He could no longer shamefully rely only on a woman, and he didn't even approach her. Now he wished to apologize to her someday when he became stronger. Having heard all she needed, Lunacia hurried to leave the place. She remembered Rondel as a man who depended solely on his power. Now he had managed to change thanks to Lord Nox's choice. She no longer cared what happened to him, but this slightly influenced her opinion of him. In the end, the girl returned home right at dusk. Nox was not at all happy about how late she had arrived. He scolded her, saying he was already going to look for her at the palace. Her heart stopped when she said she had fainted during tea. She tried to dissuade him from calling a doctor and getting straight to the point. Nox didn't care, but she had to receive her guest. Lunacia was surprised to hear that a guest had arrived. The next instant, she saw a boy appear in the room. In front of her stood a cheerful Solil, whom she hadn't seen since the ball. She hugged her brother tightly and said she only wanted to see her. The young man instantly regretted it when Nox dragged him by the neck. He scolded him for arriving uninvited and pouncing on his fiancée. Lunacia expected that attitude from her brother and asked him to let go. The young woman bent down and stared fixedly at her brother. She smiled calmly and suggested they talk in her room. As soon as they were alone, Solil was amazed by his brother-in-law's character. He described the 30 minutes they spent together as torture. The young woman decided to show him a different side of her beloved Marquis. She told him he was the kindest man she had ever met. Solil was willing to believe it just because she thought so. He suddenly asked if she was happier here than at the Hassel house. Lunacia looked away and replied that she had found her happiness here. It seems her answer finally put an end to Solil's reflections. He bowed and sincerely apologized for having used her for his power. Lunacia never thought she would hear something like that in her life. He admitted that he saw the true face of his family after she left. Only now could he understand the hell she went through all these years. Solil remained standing with his head bowed, saying he understood her feelings. The girl ordered him to raise his head and recounted that she almost lost 5 senses due to his requests. Solil was perplexed, as he hadn't even imagined such great harm. It seemed he couldn't even understand what she was talking about. Lunacia clenched her hands and said she would tell him the truth right there. She briefly insinuated that they would kill her if the lunar flower didn't help her. Solil's body trembled with fear when he realized it was his fault. He even remembered when, as a child, he took that old book from her. That was what prevented her from reading the annotations. He fell to his knees, begging her forgiveness for everything he had done. Solil wept at her feet, asking if there was any way to help her. Lunacia stood up and said his repentance was enough. She squeezed his shoulders and said it now depended on him what to do with that information. She was sure that those people would never believe such a thing. Solil declared that they should know at what cost they were happy. She was surprised that he said his father and Rosalind were acting strangely. He said something big was coming and asked them to tell him more. Meanwhile, Sierra stared intently at the cups in the kitchen. She did it so intensely that even the second maid noticed her attitude. It turned out she was thinking about whether she should serve the small cakes and tea now. On the one hand, she wanted to do it, but she knew Knox wanted Solil to leave. She even thought about putting salt in her brother's tea. Sierra shook the container with satisfaction. It seemed like a brilliant idea to her. Imagine her surprise upon seeing Prince Gendel behind her. He explained that he had arrived at the Marquis's mansion a short time ago. While going to see Knox, they invited him for an interesting chat and delicious tea. He winked slyly and said that was the real reason for his visit. Sierra, trembling with surprise, offered to accompany him. She almost kicked him out of the kitchen and took him straight to Knox. She announced that she brought an important mission for the Marquis of the lunar eclipse. Apparently, a ship of allies would arrive in 3 days south of the sea. Knox frowned, visibly annoyed, and asked why he should receive them. Gendel clarified that Marquis Fand had built a bridge of friendship with that country. The opening of gifts was also planned at the gala dinner. Knox had never attended events of the Fand family before. The prince explained that this was due to Lady Ruby's personal aversion. He added that, in principle, their parents should be the ones to welcome them. Unfortunately, yesterday Gendel's mother suddenly fell ill. Fortunately, no one knew that she was now unable to get up. Unnecessary rumors could arise if their representatives did not receive the guests. That's why they decided to choose him to play this role. Gendel explained that some common bandits had appeared in the south. They were nothing special, but an expert there would be helpful. Knox thought deeply about his request, which he could not refuse. Gendel was surprised by how quickly his friend had accepted. The prince snapped his fingers and said he wanted to see him with a partner. For that very reason, he advised Knox to take Lunacia with him. Knox was not thrilled by that request, as he knew it would be dangerous there. Meanwhile, Lunacia had just arrived to greet the prince. Hendel smiled happily and told her to come in. The girl bowed, apologizing for her tardiness. Knox immediately started asking her how the talk with her brother had gone. Shortly before their farewell, she ordered him to remember something. She asked him to notify her immediately by letter if her father and Rosalind acted strangely. Solil agreed to her request, but then, unexpectedly, hesitated. He sincerely begged her to remain his twin brother after all. Lunacia was surprised again by how important that was to the young man. She smiled and told him he was the only family she had in that hell. To finish, she asked him to think before doing anything. She gave him her kind smile and called it advice from his little twin sister. Solil clenched his fists with determination and promised he would try hard. After that, he turned toward the exit and said goodbye. Before leaving completely, with a trembling voice, he begged her not to die. She couldn't promise him that, but she noticed he was speaking with his family for the first time. Knox gently stroked her shoulder and smiled slightly. Gendel interrupted them, jokingly calling them newlyweds. He was happy with how well they got along and offered her a seat next to him. Knox followed his example and sternly asked him not to talk too much. Gendel smiled playfully again and asked Lunacia if she loved the sea. It sounded so serene that it took the young woman by surprise. The prince said it was amazing to sail on a ship in the open sea. He seemed to be trying to attract her before explaining the essence of the matter. The girl clumsily lowered her gaze and said she had never seen the sea. After thinking for a moment, she replied that she would like to see the sea. Knox did not approve of the prince trying to trick Lunacia. The prince smiled and said he was weak when it came to his wife. Winking slyly, he expressed hope that they would accept the mission. Knox briefly told the girl exactly what her task would consist of. He added that the Fand family was also involved, so they couldn't refuse less. Urin smiled and said he didn't even believe they had invited Knox. Before leaving, he said that would have been impossible without Lunacia. Lunacia asked if the question was whether she was going or not. The girl said she could stay at the mansion if he asked her to. The man paused thoughtfully and then asked her if she wanted to see the sea. He remembered his promise to show her beautiful places. The girl instantly remembered he was talking about those notes in her diary. She was already grateful for what she had seen by his side and didn't want to ask for more. He had already done a lot for someone who would soon lose their sight. Finally, she smiled and said she would go with him. Urin was pleased with her decision and immediately hurried to support her. He added that everything would be fine, even if bandits appeared there. Shortly after, Lunacia could see the immense sea. Before, she hadn't even imagined it was actually that big. Nox said that an Imperial warship was prepared for anti-piracy measures. Thus, they also wanted to demonstrate their power to their allies. Lunacia asked when they would see the rest of the ships. The girl admitted that the vastness of the world took her breath away. Seeing her smile, Nox knew it was worth bringing her. He proposed sailing with her beyond the sea when they found the lunar flower. Lunacia unintentionally remembered her twin brother's request. Because of everything she heard, she involuntarily wished to keep living. A sailor reported the arrival of fog from the southwest. Nox tensed, knowing the allies were supposed to arrive from that direction. Lunacia had always heard that the sea was dangerous because of its catastrophes. She even considered the idea of seeing the future through Nox. He snapped her out of her thoughts, telling her not to lean too far over the railing. The young woman didn't want to use her abilities, but the situation was becoming urgent. She closed her eyes, mentally hoping nothing bad would happen. Another crew member announced the sighting of an allied ship. The strangest thing was that there was absolutely no one aboard. Nox cautiously said they would have to get closer and inspect it. Lunacia tried to dissuade him from the danger, but they had no other option. He gently stroked her cheek and asked her to wait there while he checked the ship. His confident voice brought calm, but anxiety continued to consume her. She begged him to, at least, let her see the future before he left. Nox refused, reminding her to use her gift only in emergencies. He meant those moments when she needed to protect herself. She tried to argue back, but he showed her his sharp sword. Nox smiled and said that weapon worked on land and at sea. In just a couple of minutes, he had a patrol ready. Upon reaching the Allied ship, they confirmed there was no one aboard. He proposed splitting up to inspect the vessel for clues. As soon as he entered the hold, he discovered a wild beast. It was a tiger that only lived in those warm lands. Nox supposed that pet was used at the Fand family party. He knew it was a quiet wish and involuntarily imagined Lunacia's joy. The man suddenly got up upon detecting a strange sound. He looked among the bulky boxes and noticed a detail. In front of him sat 4 tied-up servants, abandoned in the hold. He introduced himself as a man from the Sanri's empire and asked if they were from the country of Miura. The man recounted that fog came upon them and they were attacked by bandits. Nox only at the last moment realized it could be an ambush. Unfortunately, he only understood when a bandit appeared behind him. Meanwhile, Lunacia watched the ship uneasily. She became alert when a crew member reported the presence of bandits. Instantly, a knife from a bloodthirsty bandit pierced her back. Lunacia froze, realizing they were surrounded. One of them shouted with joy that they had taken the ship and hostages. They demanded all the gold in exchange for the lives of the people. They tried to drag Lunacia away, but she started worrying about Nox. On the other hand, Jendal didn't even suspect the sudden attack. His mother expressed her hope that the Alliance's landing would be peaceful. She was still worried about the Iltern family, but the prince calmed her down. Despite everything, she remained worried about the possible appearance of pirates. Jendal smiled and told her she knew very little about his best friend. There were many stories about his bravery on the battlefield. On repeated occasions, they had compared him to a wild tiger and a wolf. He added that Nox was a beast who had someone to protect. And how? The prince squeezed his mother's hand and asked her to focus on her health. He reassured her with his smile and told her he would be waiting for news from his friends. Meanwhile, Lunacia consoled herself, thinking that the pirates were no match for her husband. She recalled the confidence with which he headed towards that ship. That gave her hope, but anxiety continued to torment her heart. Meanwhile, the pirates identified her as a high-ranking woman. They were happily planning the best way to treat her. One dreamed of what he would do to her in his house, but only death awaited him. They trembled with fear when they realized their minutes were numbered. The next instant, they were on the deck floor, seriously injured. All of this happened right in front of their accomplice, who was terrified. Nox regretted that his Lunacia was in the sight of those scoundrels. The pirate tried to use hostages as a shield, not knowing that Nox had already freed them. The man continued to hurl threats, thinking it would help him. Nox simply raised his sword calmly and said his assumptions were correct. He told the pirate that he had taken care of eliminating every single one of them. The bandit felt dread upon seeing their lifeless bodies. How horrible! He looked him in the eyes and called him the most hideous monster. What an atrocity! Lunacia could breathe a sigh of relief upon finding him safe and sound. What a relief. She shuddered upon discovering the enemy lurking with a rifle. Watch out. The man prepared to shoot directly at his rival's back. Lunacia screamed with all her might, calling him her dear Nox. My love. He immediately turned upon hearing his wife's furious scream. Alert! In the very next instant, he managed to dodge the pirate's shot. Close one. The bandit huddled in the corner terrified upon realizing his failure. To his great surprise, the waves began to rock the ships violently. Due to the sudden storm, the bandit rolled like a barrel off the deck. He fell into the open sea, which reduced his chances of a peaceful death to 0. It seems Lunacia was in the same situation and failed to grab the railing. The next instant, she felt herself flying directly into the sea abyss. Nox immediately tensed, feeling great fear for his wife. Sinking, Lunacia felt as if she had been thrown into a world without sensations. She involuntarily wondered if this was truly the future that awaited her. It was as if she had forgotten that she still had someone willing to fight for her until the end. He swam towards her, trying to wrest life from the fury of the sea. In the end, he did manage to save the girl from a tragic end. As soon as she regained consciousness, she found herself facing a huge tiger. Despite the animal's smile, she shrank back in fear instantly. The maid apologized and said she took the animals out of the cage to check them. She smiled and said they were trained not to attack people. Lunacia immediately smiled upon noticing the animal's friendliness. She didn't manage to take a step towards him when the tiger licked her. The animal captivated her so much that she even forgot about Nox. He fixed his wet hair and said all the pirates are captive. Now she could breathe easily, happy that everyone was safe. Nox asked her if she had used her abilities. The girl immediately analyzed her condition and said there were no changes. Nox was glad that his hearing aid was resistant to seawater. He extended his hand to her and suggested that she should change and dry off. Lunacia smiled and nodded as her entire outfit was soaked. After a while, they could breathe easily in their cabin. Lunacia, thoughtfully, thanked Nox for pulling her out of the water and saving her. She, with a smile, said that Lord Nox had saved her again. To her surprise, the man replied that she had saved his life first. He remembered that if she hadn't screamed then, he would have been shot. He also added that it is natural for a husband to help his wife. The man said it with such certainty that Lunacia felt affection and embarrassment again. She smiled and said that, in that case, the wife must also help her husband. The young woman sank into her thoughts and said it was horrible to feel a world without emotions. She understood that that tragic day of deprivation was approaching ever closer. Lunacia again acknowledged that her desire to live with Nox remained intact. She felt as if she were back at sea, which is why she decided to tell him that. The emotions overwhelmed the man so much that he impulsively hugged Lunacia. It seems she did not expect this sudden demonstration of affection. It was hard for her to pronounce those words, but she promised she would find the lunar flower. In the end, they managed to complete the mission of meeting the allies. Later, Yendal offered a reward for capturing the attacking pirates. After that, Nox declared that he would not accept any more favors from him. Despite everything, Prince Shendhul remained carefree. After some time, the night of the full moon finally arrived. After appearing at the Marquis's banquet, she decided to look for lunar flowers. She also wanted to closely monitor the actions of her father and Rosaline. The young woman clutched her heart, wondering if she would manage to find the flowers. She felt that now her own destiny was in her hands. Lunacia almost jumped when Sierra shouted her name. The girl turned thoughtfully and asked the maid to repeat. The maid handed her 2 boxes and asked which necklace she preferred. Lunacia said it was fine, but everything felt like it was in a fog. After that, she pointed her finger at the box in Sierra's hands. The maid supported her decision, believing it perfectly matched the dress. She firmly promised to dress her in all possible luxury. Lunacia smiled, realizing she now had people who cared about her. It was these good people who gave her the desire to keep living. Even if everything is decided tonight, she will continue to believe in the future until the end. Meanwhile, Lord Nox was already ready for the banquet, with everything prepared. Lunacia thanked him for his patience and noticed their outfits matched. The man stopped thoughtfully and looked her straight in the eyes. Yurin repeated once more the compliment that Nox should have given her. Although Nox was not so eloquent, he still appreciated her attention. The girl agreed and said she really looked pretty. She added that she regretted having to part with him so soon. Lunacia knew she had to change into light clothing before looking for the lunar glade. Nox did everything possible to be present at the gala dinner. Now she held his hand as he called this night special. He looked at his wife with determination and suggested they move on. Yurin waved his hand and promised to meet them later. He told them to go enjoy the dinner first. After that, the newlyweds headed to the carriage to go to the banquet. She froze when the Marquis suddenly mentioned her dress. Knox leaned close to her ear and told her it suited her very well. Then he turned away, as if nothing had happened, as if he feared her reaction. Lunacia smiled sincerely and thanked him for the compliment. After a while, they finally arrived at the event location. Lunacia was delighted with this wonderful ball and so many guests. They also noticed that the imperial family's guard was heavily armed. Lunacia happily discovered that the Empress looked radiant. She grimly surveyed those present, looking for unwanted guests. Lunacia noticed her happy father and a slightly thinner mother. She immediately thought that Solil and Cynthia would be at home. She was mainly concerned about Rosaline's strange behavior. They turned when they heard the cheerful voice of the younger brother, Knox. The young woman bowed respectfully and thanked him for the invitation. He only replied that Ruby had invited them and would visit them soon. The Lord was also very happy that Knox had joined them. Lunacia noticed the Lord's unexpected perturbation, who confessed something. The girl's eyes widened upon hearing that the Lord's mother was also there. The next instant, she heard that woman calling him towards her. She asked with disdain who he was talking to, as if declaring war.